Oh, yeah.
All right, so we welcome back. You can have your seats. Bill? Yo, Bill, take your seat. Thank you. So next is 2016-1120, Appeal of Planning Director's Denial of Commercial Cannabis Cultivation Registration Application 2016-767. And that would be Mr. Groh.
That's me. And my name is Paul Groh. I've met a few of you. For the ones that I haven't met, I am an extra hire over in the planning department. And this is my first presentation before the board today. And we'll get that rolling here. So, Appeal 2016-1120, Morgan Groover, Commercial Cannabis Registration, denial by the Planning Director. Now, this was originally a submittal done by the applicant, Paul Carney, and that was received June 27, 2016. The denial from the Planning Director came down October 28, 2016, and the applicant, who is actually, the appellant, who is actually the landowner, is Morgan Groover, and he received his appeal November 10th, 2016. So, project description, appeal the planning director's denial of the commercial cannabis registration. The registration was denied for the following 3 reasons. Applicant did not produce evidence that no later than May 10, 2016, grading and or earth moving commensurate with the area proposed to be cultivated had occurred on the site. The second reason, grading or earth moving for the purpose of establishing or expanding a commercial cannabis site occurred after May 10th, 2016. And the final reason was application for registration contained false or misleading information. Okay. I'd like to move on to the first reason for denial. And basically, before we do that, let's find the location here. You can see that is the site right there, the big red triangular shape you see in the middle of the screen, and that's out towards the end of Armstrong Road. Basically 80.2 acres at 14525 Waldeer's Path in Sheep Ranch, California. The initial complaint, the initial reason for denial, the first reason for denial is the applicant's failure to meet the requirements of County Code Section 1795-165 in 3A and B. And that reads as follows. The registrant must provide evidence satisfactory to the planning director that no later than May 10, 2016, he or she has taken demonstrable steps towards the development of a commercial medical cannabis cultivation site on the parcel as demonstrated by criteria described in either A or B, and by at least one of the following described as C2K. And we are concerned here about A and B. That criteria, A and B, is either date stamp photographic evidence of grading and or earth moving commensurate with the area proposed to be cultivated, or date stamp photographic evidence of cultivation commensurate with the area proposed to be cultivated. We received from the applicant, Mr. Paul Carney, we received with his application date stamp photographs dated March 5th, 2016. There were 27 of these photographs submitted, and they basically broke down into 2 different types. I called one group the brush scraped bare earth pad, and typical of that group is scraped bare earth, like you see in these 2 photographs here. The debris that was sitting on the site is pushed out to the edges of this new clearing, and surrounding it you'll see that there's pines. There's some pretty dense forest around the site. The next type we received I like to call the light brush pad. Here it appears that a pad was cleared at some point in time in the past. And on the pad, we'll see that there are pots. You'll see some pots to the right side in both of these photographs. Scattered tubing, some wood fencing that's laying in the pile over there, and a water tank. I think I'm going to skip that for the moment. Now, to meet the criteria, we need date-stamped photographic evidence of grading and/or earth moving commensurate with the area proposed to be cultivated. The area proposed to be cultivated is what we see in the upper left corner up there, that picture of the plot plan. In the plot plan, there is an area designated. It's where the yellow blob is, and the yellow blob is pointing to a square, which is basically the area they were proposing to have cultivated, which is that right there. That's the area proposed to be cultivated, right there. What we find at a little different, So when we went to look at these photographs, we were assuming that we were looking at this area right here. This is the area that's proposed to be cultivated with the application, okay? When we went to investigate this, we went and looked at aerial photography that was taken on June 9th over here. And what we find is that the area that was proposed to be cultivated is actually this area up in here. In your staff report, this is called the final developed area, right there. And we can see as of June 9th, this had not been developed, okay? So, actual date-stamped photographic evidence of grading and/or earth moving commensurate with the area proposed to be cultivated, did not exist. Now, Mr. Gruber, in his appeal to us, stated that this was correct. And this the statement here out of his appeal reads, the grow area later developed on the parcel was clearly not brushed prior to May 10th, 2016. Okay? By that evidence alone, I think there is a failure to meet the required section there, 1795, 165, and 3A. Subsequent to receiving our denial, Mr. Grover filed his appeal letter. In his appeal letter, he developed, or he told us, that basically what his plan had been and how this had developed was that there was an area he described as his abandoned developed area, which is actually right down here. And you've seen this in the staff report. Mr. Grover, in his appeals, said that that abandoned developed area was basically, and the way I read the appeal letter, it sounds like Paul Carney was the one that went out and did the development in the abandoned developed area. And I'm going to read from Mr. Gruber's appeal letter here. He says, Mr. Carney and I met and reached an agreement for him to implement a medical cannabis cultivation site in late 2015. Mr. Carney was diligent in his efforts, and a site near my house was prepared for cultivation. Okay? Let's see here. I need to go back. Let's see. Now, this is a photograph of Mr. Gruber's abandoned developed area. This is actually an aerial that was taken May 31st. And on that pad right there, his abandoned developed area, we still do not see any sign of pots, tubing, fencing. We don't see the scraped earth that's typical in those photographs that were submitted to us. There's not necessarily a whole lot of debris piled up at the edges here. And there's not any dense pine forest cover around that from our observations. So in looking at Mr. Gruber's reasoning, In looking at his reasoning, that this was actually the area he had developed, and that met the requirements of establishing grading and showing development commensurate with the establishment of this commercial grow. I still don't see it there, okay? I think that's about it with that. So that is the reasoning behind our first denial. Is there any questions about that before I move to the second?
The original area that you showed up there that they had originally supposedly done prior to moving the area, how far from the property line was that?
That's a good question, because that's one of the only reasons that that sort of thing can happen. The edge of this, that right there, I would say it's about 130 feet to, let me see here if I can find, there we go. Okay, so the edge
If
of
that
yeah,
shot's
from there
correct.
to there, it's about 130 feet. The real property line may be actually down another 40 feet. So this is 130 to 170 feet from the property line.
And what does urgency ordinance say specifically on how many feet it needs to be from the
75?
property? Huh?
75.
75,
So
yeah.
it's over 75 feet.
Right.
So then-
yeah. And
Okay.
also, what goes along with that exception is that anybody who wants to move, after that May 10th deadline, needs to submit to the planning department a plan that shows that happening with their June 30th application. So there's two
And
things
that's-
you need to qualify. You
Right.
need to be within the setback area, and you also need to bring us a plan, with your application that shows that that move is going to occur.
Understood.
Along with the grading permit application.
Yeah,
Yeah,
very good. Any other questions?
yeah. Looking at figures 1 and 2, one of which is dated March 5th, 2016, that's the ones with the bare dirt on one and the piping on the other.
Yes, sir.
As you interpret the aerial of May 31 of the abandoned developed area,
Yes, sir.
do you see those cleared off areas in that May 31 picture?
I personally do not see any that are cleared in that May 31st aerial that are typical of, say, figure 1. That's scraped area? Okay, very good. Let's see here, I want to go back and get that back on the screen. There was some discussion about this within our department, and the planning director actually felt that it could be possible that the photographs you see typical of figure 2, that may have occurred on that site. That was the planning director's feeling. So that's, when you read the staff report, I think there was something along that line that it could have been. Anything could be. One thing I'd like to point out on this aerial right here, though, is that you see this road up here? You can see tire tracks right there. Okay? You can see there's a road. There's been access going down that. We don't see that occurring on this parcel here, our abandoned developed area. Now, if Mr. Carney was out there diligently pursuing the development of this site, I would think we would see some signs of activity on that abandoned developed area in this area. And I am just not seeing that.
Now, if I understand this right, the appellant is saying that the abandoned developed area, which you have on the screen, was cleared prior to May 10th. Is that right?
That's my understanding.
Okay, is there any photographic evidence that that's true?
The only photographic evidence we have would be this right here, okay? At some time, it's pretty obvious that at some time this area right here was cleared, as was probably this in here. You can see how heavy the brush is here. Basically a chaparral-covered hill. I would think that at some point in time this was cleared out here, and probably this out here.
But that photo's dated May 31.
Yeah, but I'm not saying like immediately preceding May 31.
But
I am thinking possibly myself in terms of a couple of 3 years or more.
do you have any photographs that look like the May 31 photograph that were taken prior to May 10th that show that cleared area?
I think figure 2 in your staff report, and there was some internal debate within our department, it's been clear, and this has been one of the challenges we've had with implementing the ordinance, was trying to determine where were these photographs taken. You know, if there was no clear identifying feature, the shape seems to sort of represent the hourglass shape of the cleared area in figure 3 that shows the abandoned area. You know, with some brush coming up, you know, from prior, you know, it looked like it was graded a year or two, roughly 3 years previously. It could represent that. It's hard to definitively say that it represents it, but my observation, and this is where we disagreed a little bit internally on it, but it looked to me like it could represent that.
Okay, let's assume that that area shown on the May 31 picture was cleared prior to May 10th. It's clear that that's not the ultimate growth site, though. The ultimate growth site was cleared
Correct.
later and planted later,
Yes, sir.
and he moved it. Okay, under the ordinance, can you clear a site prior to May 10th, decide that you don't like that site, maybe for good reasons, go clear another site after May 10th and have that qualify under the ordinance?
My understanding is that you cannot do that.
I would concur that you cannot do that.
Okay, isn't that exactly what happened here? If you take what the appellant says as being correct.
Yes.
That is
Right.
pretty, yes. And yeah, and in his appeal letter, he basically states that's what he did.
Okay.
One other question. The appellant seems to be the landowner, not the applicant. Paul Carney, have you heard from the applicant post?
Yes, that was an issue I wanted to bring up when Paul concluded his presentation, but since we're there, we did receive a letter from Mr. Carney. It was dated November 9th, and I think you got a copy of that.
Okay.
I'm no longer with this property nor Morgan Gruber. Please terminate any association liability with this case and notify the appropriate agency of this change. Well, he can't terminate his liability. He is the registrant. But the code clearly confers the right to register to the registrant, and it's not transferable. So in a way, this whole, unless for some reason Mr. Gruber and Mr. Carney were to resolve whatever differences they have, and Mr. Carney were to want to continue to grow on the site, the appeal is moot because you can't transfer the registration from Mr. Carney to anyone else, including the property owner. So we do have additional language that's been presented to you, and I believe Mr. Gruber has a copy of it as well, for an additional finding to be added to the proposed resolution, should you agree with staff to deny the appeal.
Mr. Gruber, however, he does have the right to appeal the planning department's decision because under the code sections of the county code regarding planning appeals, any aggrieved party can appeal. And an aggrieved party is a person, organization, corporation, concerned citizen, or any individual or group which demonstrates to the appellant board that they have an interest, financial or otherwise, in the property affected by the decision. So it's very broad.
Understood. Thank you.
Very good. Are there any other questions on that cause for denial?
No.
I'd like to move on to the second one then. Let's see here. Here we are. Basically, what happened here was the site was developed, the actual site, road site was developed after May 10th. In County Code Section 1795-165 in 7 reads, as of May 10th, 2016, all grading and earth moving in the portion of the parcel to be used for cultivation shall have been completed, other than that grading necessary for a proportional adjustment to the cultivation area to comply with the setback requirements of this chapter. A registrant seeking to conduct grading for this purpose beyond May 10, 2016 must provide the Planning Department with a copy of a current grading permit for this proportional adjustment at the time of submitting his or her application for registration. No additional grading or earth moving for the purpose of establishing or expanding any commercial cannabis cultivation site shall be permitted after May 10th, 2016. So when we look up here on the screen, we'll see that the aerial of June 9th, 2016 shows what was later the final developed area as still consisting of brush. The aerial that was later taken August, September 2016 shows that that site had been developed by then, and there is a grow occurring right there. That is a grow that we previously did not see. So, if we read it right there, no additional grading or earth moving for the purpose of establishing or expanding a commercial cannabis cultivation shall be permitted after May 10th, 2016. We have visual evidence there that is exactly what happened in this parcel. So we feel that was a failure to meet 1719-165. Any of you members have any questions about that? Okay, no questions there. I'd like to move on to our final reason for denial, which is this right here. The application contained false or misleading information. Not reading the requirements. Well, the requirement actually, 1795-178-4 reads, registration of a medical cannabis cultivation site pursuant to this chapter may be invalidated by the planning director for any of the following reasons. And reason number 4 listed is application for registration contained false or misleading information. The photographs that were submitted with the application, ones that came in on June 4th, ones that are dated March 5th up there that show the scraping, the bare earth, we believe were meant to mislead us into believing that that had actually occurred on that site. And obviously, when you look at the aerial of June 6 over there, you'll see that that had not occurred in the area that was proposed to be cultivated. And that is the basis for and the failure to meet 1795-178-4. Any questions on that?
I don't believe there are right
Okay.
now.
Very good.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I think that's it. We reviewed the, yes, we did.
So would the appellant like to present testimony for the commission?
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the commission. My name is Morgan Groover. I'm actually live at the address, and I'm not as terrible as I just sounded, or as it just sounded like. Can we flip back, because there were several things that I'd like to address in the sequence that staff went over them. And then I actually have a question. First of all, I'd like to state, unlike other things today, all of my application was in timely, was done properly, with some discussion about how properly. None of, we're not asking, because I didn't submit something, my regional quality control board NOIs are in on time. As a matter of fact, I had my actual permit from them prior to September 7th. So in my appeal letter, what I said diligence was actually happening. The applicant, and as you can see, applicant not being here is just as disappointing to me as apparently he was to your staff. But they had an attorney that were putting together the application and said everything was going to be fine. All of that went in. Subsequently, I was not as comfortable with things that were going on as I was led to believe I would have been. That site that Mr. Groh showed to you was cleared in 2015, and yeah, there's probably we had a prior to the Butte fire, we had I had leased that property to a person that was growing out there. That picture I can see, if you show me, there's white spots on there where you know, Mr. Gross says you can't see anything, but there's obviously equipment out there. In another aerial, you can see it's from a different angle. It's coming from the angle at the top of the picture. You can actually see white mixing tanks that are still lying out there. And I'd like to, because of that point, I'd like to interject one thing as I go through these. This isn't my first application to the Calaveras County Planning Commission. I used to be the project engineer for Saddle Creek, for instance. I used to, actually, Copper Cove was mentioned today. I was the project engineer for that. I understand how Planning Commission or Planning Department submittals should be. When this urgency ordinance came out, it had specific things in it that made this site unreasonable to make an application at. One of them is the proximity. There's some drainage just to the north of there. This is actually, okay, that's north is up. I'm sorry, so just to the west of there. That would have made this a Tier 3 with the Regional Water Quality Control Board. So I sat down and said, look, this site is not good. We need to move this site. And the site was subsequently moved. And the argument that staff is giving you, well, first of all, let me say, every single piece of paper that we submitted for the application was for the final design site. We never applied for this site to be the design, to be the final site. However, as part of the ordinance, it says that you have to show proof that you were doing this here prior to May 10th. All this is proof that we are doing it here prior to May 10th. Okay, I'm separating those things out. My site is my 80 acres. Okay, when I defined my site in my application, if we can flip through and show the box next to the yellow that Mr. Gross showed, every single piece of paper, including to the state, including to the county, was on that site. But that doesn't mean prior to this urgency ordinance, that's where I was leasing property to someone for a commercial growth. So everything that I said in the application, okay, I'm saying again, I had an applicant who had an attorney. I've never even actually seen the entire package. So if I say I don't like to, do that. But so I don't see, and I don't agree with staff when they say that I moved this site, because every single application to the state and into the county was in the exact same spot, but where a section of the ordinance said, demonstrate you've been, had a cultivation here in the past, there's a different site. And I use that information to demonstrate that it was going prior. This actually, that site was graded early in 2015. Actually, nothing happened on it. There was stuff going on, and then the Butte fire made us evacuate, and because we couldn't care for the crop, everything went away. So that site has actually has been there. It was graded early in 2015. Now, I don't believe that there was anything misleading in anything that I said regarding that. Everything that ever went in any of the applications, sir, I'm sorry, do you have a question?
No, go
Okay.
ahead. I will.
Everything that we said in the application was to the site that's shown on the screen right here. But there was specifically, can someone read me the section where it says?
And I got it right here. As of May 10th, 2016, all grading and earth movement in the portion of the parcel to be used for cultivation shall have been completed, other than that grading necessary for a proportional adjustment to the cultivation area to comply with the setback requirements of this chapter.
First of all, there's two different.
Very clear.
No, there's two different responses to that. First of all, that says earthwork and grading. I'm a registered professional engineer in the state of California. There's no grading done there. There was no earthwork done there. There was clearing done there, but it's in total compliance with that. As a matter of fact, I have filed with the Public Works Department a grading permit that says no grading was done. It's in the file with planning, and Mr. Packinger, the Deputy Director of Public Works, has agreed with me that no grading was done there. So the argument that grading or earth moving is a moot point, and based off of my stamp, there was no grading or earth moving, and so this does not apply to my project here, and I believe that this is an error from planning staff. I'm sorry. Okay, what
Mr. Groover, I'm just going to ask you to kind of summarize your comments, and then I'm sure we'll have some questions, but just to keep us, moving along, if you could.
I understand, because I'm not even sure if this is reasonable to do now after the notification I just got from Paul Carney. We might all be.
We could be. So if you could just summarize your comments
Okay.
in the next
I agree with
three minutes.
I'm not going to argue the staff report. I'm not going to. My response to the staff report is there. There's a couple of things I want to mention. Like, it's obvious that they're using grading and earth moving to mean clearing brush, and there's totally two different things legally and in this ordinance. And I'm the one that specifically is registered in the state of California to determine whether grading was done, and Mr. Packinger agrees with me that there was not. So this has nothing to do with my project, in my opinion. All right. There was, the reason that the site moved was because of water quality issues. Once the urgency ordinance came in, it said that the county was going to require certification with the state. In addition to that, the urgency ordinance has a great deal of problems with the grows, the commercial grows being a nuisance to the public. That original site is within sight of my house. So if I had visitors, workmen, stuff like that, all of that would be visible from my house. And I took that to heart, that the board wants it out of sight. Right now, the final grow area is a half a mile from the road. Can't see it from anyone's house in the area. It's completely in compliance with the county ordinance, and it's actually part of this move to happen was to make that compliance that the board required, so that it wouldn't be a nuisance, so that it wouldn't be visible to people, and so that it would comply with the Regional Water Quality Control Board issues. So in summary, I don't agree with how staff is for instance, grading and earth moving didn't occur. So I don't agree with staff in their interpretation. I'm on the site, and I want to make one little point, and then I'll go from there. When I put it, for instance, a permit application in for Saddle Creek, for instance, we had a great deal of conversation with staff all of the time. Staff called me on the phone. Actually, one of my partners, Roger Pitto, usually got those calls, but sometimes I did. When this situation hit the county was inundated with applications. I'm not going to say anything negative about the county. When I've talked to them, they've been helpful to me, but they stamped our application complete on June 6th, and I didn't hear from them again until into the first week of November. The way that I'm used to doing planning applications is I have an ongoing discussion with staff, and before it gets to a code compliance issue where, you know, there's a threat of $1,000 a day. So I kept thinking, well, if I'm not hearing anything, there's nothing wrong. To this day, staff is saying that from this aerial, he can't see anything out on the ground there. I could drive any of you out there today and show you all those pots, all those tubes, all that fencing on that site. I would have been happy to do that for anyone on staff, and I'd probably have bought them lunch at the same time to show that. That stuff's still sitting there, despite not being able to see it from several thousand feet in the air aerial. And I am going to say that, as a matter of fact, with Mr. Groh, we did a different aerial that the county had. It was from a different angle, and you can see some white pixels from my mixing tank at that site. So had at any point in time, if this was actually, the other picture's actually taken from the north, and those trees that are on the south side there's a mixing tank in there, and you can maybe even see the white pixel. I can see it right in there now. So the point is, okay, the guy that I leased the property to wasn't the smartest choice. Agreed. I disagree with the findings that, you know, we wouldn't, I mean, there's clearing, grubbing, then grading. Clearing is certainly a reasonable thing to do, well short of grading. Every single one of these, I have a different explanation to, and I'd be happy to sit down and take someone out and show them, but I know that, I'm not asking you to, I know that happened. I don't look at this from the standpoint that someone is trying to, lack of a better word, screw the county. I don't look at this as being false or misleading. It was confusing. I'll totally admit that. But if you separate out that thing that says, you show that you were doing this, I showed that I was doing it. Every other application was there. And for example, in the letter I got, it said, you know, all you gave me was receipts from some hardware store in, what was it, Daly City or something like that. Well, that was a 20-minute drive from Paul's house. So why should that be suspicious? All of this was suspicion that we're trying to sneak something by the county, and that didn't happen. The only thing that happened is sat down, filled out all the applications, got them in on time. We're still in complete compliance with the code. We're still in complete compliance with code enforcement, and we have a different interpretation than
Okay.
staff.
Thank you, Mr. Gruber. Now, let's see if the commissioners have any questions.
Yeah, I do. This is probably clear, but I'll ask it anyway.
All right.
Was there any cultivation, actual growing of marijuana on the new site prior to May 10th?
On the final developed site, no.
Okay, the ordinance requires that you either have that on the site or date-stamped photographic evidence of grading and/or earth moving commensurate with the area to be cultivated And I think you've just told us there was no grading and no earth moving whatsoever on that site prior to May 10th.
I agree with you. That's correct.
Okay, so the problem is that you have to have one of those two things under this ordinance.
May I ask you the definition of site? Because I look at site as my 80-acre parcel. Where I choose to then apply to put a parcel, it's still my site.
It doesn't
May I-
matter what the site is, because you don't have grading or earth moving anywhere on that 80 acres for planting marijuana. You just told us that. And you didn't have any cultivation.
I'm sorry, sir. What I thought you asked me, you said, was there any grading or earthworthing on the site? I heard that as the final developed site, because there was plenty of grading and earth moving on the initial site under 50 yards, but we did dig holes, which is dirt out and stuff. So again, we're having confusion in the semantics of what we're talking about here.
Let me clear it up a little bit for you.
Thank you, sir.
As of May 10th, 2016, all grading and earth movement in the portion of the parcel to be used for cultivation. Okay,
And-
so it says the portion of the parcel
Okay, and-
to be used for cultivation. So
Okay, read-
it defines the spot we're all
Okay,
talking about.
what
for
was
you
that?
On your 80 acres.
Okay, what does that say had to be done?
You had to be growing by May 10th on that portion.
Right, yeah, there's multiple parts here. You can, if
And-
you read through the urgency ordinance fully, and you go to 17.95 and 5, 6, 7, 8, this
Okay.
goes all through this and defines it clearly as the portion of the property you intend to grow on. So at that point, you could call it the whole property your site the whole time, but your whole site only has to include the portion of which the cultivation is proposed to be grown on. That clarifies it in my mind.
Okay, and I understand what you said, Commissioner, and I'm not going to argue with that, but you started off reading a section of the code. Would you read that to me again, please?
Okay.
And read the complete statement.
All the way through.
No, just how you
I'm
started
not going
your...
to read the whole code.
No,
right
no,
now,
no,
but
just-
I'll
just-
just N7 of 17.95. As of May 10th, 2016, all grading and earth movement in the portion of the parcel to be used for cultivation shall have been completed, other than that grading necessary for a proportional adjustment to the cultivation area
Which
to
is-
comply
which-
with setback requirements of this chapter.
Which
You
was...
know, so it goes on to define the only time when you're allowed to move it.
I understand,
And it
sir.
also defines.
May I respond to that, please? There was no, I was in complete compliance with that, what you just read, because there was no grading at all done. So there was no grading done after the May 10th date that you're talking about. So we're in complete compliance with what you just read.
You said maybe not grading, but brush and shrub removal?
Just clear.
And you provided evidence from a different portion of the property
Right.
of brush and shrub removal, as you verified yourself with your own letter to the planning department.
All right, I feel like I'm getting argumentative, and that's not my intent. And-
Okay,
and
I apologize
And
if I'm
I
listening in.
apologize. I have no intent to be argumentative. Frankly, anytime that I've reached out to staff here, staff has been good to me. So I'm not complaining about anyone here. I'm complaining that I don't believe the way that the ordinance is being directed towards my situation is the intent of the ordinance or is actually legal.
So we're really kind of talking about a different way of perceiving the ordinance. I don't think that's going to get resolved here.
Right.
So, Mr. Groover, could I ask if there's anyone else with us this afternoon that would like to address?
Certainly. I
Okay.
don't know anyone else in the room, so...
Doesn't mean that they might not have to weigh in on this. No one. Okay, so is there, do you have like a final?
I would like to ask a question.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
You've referenced your tenant that leased your land, who was a bad choice, which that's neither here nor there. But we also have a letter in our possession stating that he is no longer a part of managing and the registered, he wants to be removed as the registrant on this property.
Ma'am, I just saw that for the first time 10 minutes ago.
Okay.
So actually, I would be argumentative about the points we're making, but I'm not even sure that it's, you
Well,
know,
and I guess-
it's worth doing. So someone needs to tell me if that just makes this whole thing go away anyway.
Well, and
Because if
then-
it does, I'll just go sit down.
So, well, with that, why don't you, we'll close the public hearing and let you know.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Discussion,
I said most of mine.
okay. I would say that, there's multiple points of failure here. The date stamp aerial photographic evidence, the new site versus the old site, the fact that I haven't seen evidence that there was any grow on the site prior to May 10th. And certainly, not to be forgotten is that, Mr. Gruber is not the applicant. So he's not the registered applicant on this parcel, so, which Mr. Carney is. So I don't know what's standing. I think that calls into question our ability to, if we were.
You certainly have standing to appeal. There's no
Yes.
question about that. The question is what would be the result of granting the appeal?
To somebody who doesn't
The-
want,
the-
he doesn't want to continue, Mr. Carney, the
Right.
registrant.
And so there could be no other cultivation occurring on the site except for Mr. Carney.
Okay, that's right. I mean, I would agree that he has standing to appeal, but I don't believe that the urgency ordinance allows, I think there's some language in the urgency ordinance that specifically would prohibit assignability. I would ask the Planning Commission to look at 1795-165B, the definition of applicant under 1795-150A, and the fact that the landowner himself did not submit an application by June 30th for 1795-165M1.
All right.
So,
Well, and-
The one material result that would affect Mr. Gruber is that when this registration was denied, a notice of violation was issued, proof of abatement was provided, but it was provided 13 days after notice, so Mr. Gruber would be on the hook for a couple $1,000s in fines.
Mm-hmm.
And so if he prevailed in this appeal, he would not have to pay fines.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm, because of those multiple points of failure, I'm not in favor of granting the appeal.
Well, the statute says that once the registrant, and that to be Mr. Carney, no longer has legal ownership or legal possession of the cultivation site, the registration shall be deemed automatically terminated without further notice, and no further cultivation shall be allowed at the site. It looks like that's exactly what happened.
And he wrote this letter on November 9th. That clearly was a month ago.
So it seems to me there's no way to grant this appeal
No.
because by the words of the statute, the registration is terminated. On top of all the other issues, and I think staff has correctly identified all of them, and I think staff is correct on all of them.
I concur with our.
Any other comments? I think we're ready for the recommendation. Mr. Grove?
Yes, the staff recommends that the Planning Commission adopt Resolution 2016-048, denying appeal 2016-1120, thereby upholding the Planning Director's determination to reject application 2016-767.
So would that include an amendment to add the additional evidence regarding Mr. Carney's?
Yes, that'd be an additional
Yeah.
finding and evidence.
Right.
That's provided.
Okay, so with that amendment, is there a motion?
Can I raise one question here on the resolution on page 1, section 1, the bottom of the page? the last sentence says aerial imagery flown on May 31, 2016 and June 9th, 2016 does not show any evidence of grading, earth moving, or cultivation on the parcel. I'm not sure that that's right with respect to the abandoned site.
I would concur, and I would suggest that first finding and be deleted.
Well, I think if you
Or
add,
modified.
if you add to the end of that the following phrase, commensurate with the area proposed to be cultivated, it would then be accurate.
I think that's what
We could make that.
So was those amendments, or was there another one?
No.
No.
Oh, yes, wait a
I
minute.
thought you said, no, yeah, there were two?
Yeah, there's a typo.
Okay.
Hang on.
When did I miss
Page
that?
2, under section 3, evidence, second sentence, there's appears to be the word prepitation, which I think is meant to be preparation. That's all my suggested amendments.
All right, so with those three amendments, is there a motion?
I'll make a motion.
It's been moved in second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. Thank you. So,
Again, just for the record, this action is final unless appealed within 59 days.
okay, so we are moving to 2016-1122, appeal of planning director's denial of commercial cannabis cultivation registration application 2016-938. And this is the appeal that's now asking for a continuance?
Yes, that's correct. The applicant has requested a continuance, apparently unable to attend today's meeting. As before, the option to continue is at your discretion.
Do we know
I
whether,
don't know if there's anyone representing Mr. Wong here today. He is not.
Okay.
do we know whether the harvest is complete on this parcel?
I don't. I have to assume by December 8th that it probably is. I think there's a handful of sites that may still have plants in the ground, but those are the exceptions rather than the rule. So I think that the most harvest probably ended by middle of last month.
You know, I don't, and just in reviewing the staff report, I don't know, and I'm trying to remember, oh, they had a conflict with some work schedule or something, was that?
Yes, apparently that was
Yeah.
stated.
Okay.
I don't know at this point whether continuance would adversely affect either the appellant or staff. I guess if there is an outstanding violation and he's being assessed fines, that those could accrue over this time if his denial, if his appeal were denied ultimately. So that would be the only potential drawback, I guess, from the applicant's perspective, but it's his request to continue. And if he submitted documentation that shows that the cultivation has been abated, then there would be no additional fines accrued.
But we don't know that, do we?
But I don't know that.
I believe he has provided photographic evidence to code enforcement. Unfortunately, the officer in charge of that case is training today. She's not here. But I know that over the last several weeks, she's had substantial correspondence with the appellant, and I believe that he has provided photographic evidence that abatement has occurred.
When I look at the file, there's nothing of substance presented by the appellant as to the basis of the appeal. It's just, I appeal.
Correct.
And so I have no idea what the applicant would plan to present. None of us does?
He's abated. And,
Well, we have to assume it's about time.
okay, let's assume he's
And
abated.
Probably abated means more like he's harvested.
I mean, we can have the hearing today, but it's going to be a very one-sided situation because we don't know what he has to say. He didn't submit anything except for the continuance.
Yeah, the appeal letter just only requests that we schedule the hearing sometime in late January or February. By law, we have to schedule it within 45 days of the appeal, so this is the timeframe in which we need to hear the appeal. And he has the opportunity to request that we continue, and that's what's before you right now.
Well, maybe we have to hear from the public on this request for a continuance.
Sure. Is there someone with us that would like to weigh in on this request for continuance on this appeal? Nope. Okay.
Well, I'm not seeing the harm in granting the continuance.
I
That's
concur.
like you would agree.
Yes. So
Okay.
I'm just. Yeah,
I'm
I
reading the
concur. There's
signs,
not-
Ben, I'm reading the
there's-
signs.
I apologize. I just don't see anything changing on that piece of property, and now that it's at this time of the year, so I don't see no harm in it either.
Okay. Lisa, Ted?
No problem.
If we're going to continue it, I would recommend it be continued with date certain. And why don't we continue it to the January 12th hearing?
Okay. Yes. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Is there a
Sorry.
second?
I'll say
Moved and second, all in favor,
He's
say
worried
aye.
that's his
Aye.
birthday.
Aye.
Oh. What a better way to celebrate.
I
Right.
before my birthday, so.
Maybe somebody else will get to
Oh, man, I think we're getting tired already.
I know. Moving on.
Okay.
Next up has been pulled 2016-1110, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And so then the next one would be
2016-1118, appeal of denial of commercial cannabis cultivation registration application for APN 014-009-028. Miguel?
Yes, good afternoon. This is Miguel. Let me bring up the presentation real quick. We're going to listen to that.
So, wait a minute. We're in 118? Yes.
Good afternoon, Miguel Contreras, Planning Department. I'm here presenting Appeal 2016-1118. Bilal Amin, it's a appeal for a denial for commercial cannabis by the Planning Department. I should say Department. A little background, the subject property is a 5.36 acre parcel located at 2540 Blue Ridge Road in Glencoe. Reasons for denial by planning. It was denied because cultivation site was not properly secured. Cultivation site was partially in public view. Applicant did not post application pending certificate that was issued by the planning department, and the applicant failed to provide a seller's permit by the September 7th deadline. So we'll be looking at the first reason right now. It's a violation of 17.95.165 and 10, inadequate fencing and unsecure. These pictures were taken by code enforcement on September 28, 2016. By October 27th, code enforcement had not received proof by the appellant that this had been rectified. In his appeal letter, Mr. Amin's attorney, Abdullah?
Mitch Abdallah.
Abdallah, states that the reason for this is that a county official advised them to remove their fence because it was potentially impeding a drainage, water drainage.
We'll talk in a minute.
However, in their appeal letter, they did not indicate when this county official told them to remove this fence, and they didn't specify which county official or from what department. So to the knowledge of planning and to the knowledge of code, the only county officials that have been there is code enforcement on September 28, 2016, which, like I said, were the days, or the day these pictures were taken. As you can see on the bottom left image, on the very corner of the post, it's plastic fencing, and it's not erect, it's laying slack. And on the bottom right picture, you can see there's no fencing whatsoever around that part of the cultivation area. Is there any questions at this point?
Can you switch to the pictures that you're discussing, or is that them?
That's these ones, yes.
Okay.
They are provided in the staff report. Any other questions? Nope, all right. So moving on, the next violation is a violation of 17.95.165 and 11, no screening from public view. As you can see this photo right here, you can see the cultivation site from right off of Blue Ridge Road. This picture was also taken by code enforcement the 28th of September 2016. By October 27, 2016, code enforcement had not received any proof that this had been corrected in any way. And in their appeal letter, they also cite that the fencing is not there or the screening is not there because a county official told them to remove it because it would impede with a drainage ditch or something to that effect. Any questions on this? In addition to the previous two violations, code enforcement also stated that they did not have their application pending certificate posted at all, which is a violation of 17.95.165I. And same thing, they did not provide proof to code enforcement that they had in fact posted this. And lastly, they're also in violation of 17.95.165 and 5B. And they did not provide, by the September 7th deadline, verifiable documentation of acquiring a seller's permit. They provided a seller's permit November 10th with their appeal letter. However, they did acquire a seller's permit September 1st. To the reason why it wasn't turned in time, Mr. Amin and his attorney claimed that they did submit it with their application. However, their application was received July 7th of 2016, whereas their seller's permit was issued September 1st, so it's really impossible to do. Any questions?
Yes. His appeal letter says that they submitted this application, capital A, on September 7th, by which I take it they meant not the original application, but other documentation on September 7th. And was the seller's permit actually delivered to the planning department on September 7th or before?
No, the seller's permit was not delivered to the planning department September 7th or before, and nothing was submitted September 7th.
Nothing.
Nothing that we have date stamped, nothing.
In here, it says a seller's permit was submitted on the 1st of November.
Yeah, it was submitted with, it was submitted with their appeal letter.
Okay. Or November 10th,
November
not the
10th.
1st, November 10th,
Yeah.
yes.
He did it when she did. She took the
Mm-hmm.
number.
Go ahead.
Anything else?
No, I think go ahead.
Okay, and that's it. Here's just a reference picture if at some point anybody wants to see it of aerials. But that's all staff has to present.
Okay. Any other questions of Miguel? All right.
Good afternoon, distinguished and honorable members of the Planning Commission. My name is Mitchell Abdallah of Abdallah Law Group in Sacramento. I represent Mr. Bilal in his 2 nonprofit organizations, and I feel by the end of our conversation you'll have a better understanding of what actually has transpired, and hopefully through the course of our discussion and conversation you'll see that we actually have merit for denying the permit denial. Now, Mr. Bilal is on my left. He's a resident of the area. He's been here for 6 years. He employs 2 full-time people. He's the executive director of Friendly Farms Collective and Friendly Farms Wellness, 2 nonprofit organizations that distribute medicine to individuals that are ailing in health. Mr. Bilal has spent about $5,000 to the the Board of Equalization for sales taxes. He's put in about $60,000 into his gardens between legal permits and supplies, etc. So, as a young man, he's done a lot of things, a lot of good things for the community. Now, the county has charged him with a violation for failing to submit a seller's permit timely, also for failing to meet the posting requirements, and lastly, screening requirements for the garden. Now, if we just take those one at a time, I'd like to start first with the seller's permit. And Mr. Wooster was on target when he questioned whether or not the seller's permit was submitted on July 7th or September 7th. And correct, county is right, it would have been impossible to submit it on July 7th. He didn't have it. Mr. Blau came to my office and we formed the nonprofit sometime in late August, and we received the seller's permit on September 1st. And I advised him, I don't mean to testify for him, but I advised him he needed to get his final documents into the county by September 7th, for which he did. As far as that argument goes, we emphatically deny that the documents were not submitted timely as far as the seller's permit goes. The other 2 arguments are more of this, what you would call a substantial compliance that you talked about earlier in the first matter today. I think council was on the right track in its discussions, but I think that council was maybe was given the wrong questions. What the substantial compliance doctrine is, and I'm just going to quote to you, it's an equitable argument. The laws that grew up in the 1300s in feudal England had the law, and then when someone did something that there wasn't a remedy in the law, the Crown gave to the church an opportunity in equity. What's fair, what's right, what's just, what's the right thing to do. And that's how equity grew up. And the United States has taken equity into the law courts as well, and now we're all one. So the council here has discretion to act, and it has discretion to look at the equity involved here, whether or not the substantial compliance doctrine applies. The substantial compliance doctrine says that if a good faith attempt was made to perform the requirements of a contract, but failed to exactly meet the specifics, and if the essential aim of the contract has been met, the agreement will still be considered to be having completed. Okay? So they're basically saying, I don't need to explain it to you, if you try in good faith and you come to the maybe 1 yard line but don't quite make it in, you've still substantially complied and you should be considered to be okay. Now, as far as answering your questions, and believe me, in my job I have to listen to a lot of people and it's no fun, and I know I respect how you guys are here sitting all day listening, and I commend you for that. But I think it would be prudent if I questioned Mr. Amin and just kind of ran through, rather than touting up a bunch of declarants, maybe just spend 5 minutes asking him some questions through this whole line. Would the council be okay with that?
Sure.
Okay.
Given that, we're limiting to about 15 minutes.
I'll be less than that, but thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, good afternoon, Mr. Amin. My first question to you is, did you submit all the required documents to the county on July 7th, 2016?
Yes, I submitted the first ones that were required by that date.
Okay. Did you then submit the all remaining documents to the county on September 7th, 2016?
Yes, I showed up here on the 7th, and I sat in the office, and they ran my tax ID number and stuff to get my business part qualified. I had all the information with me, but somehow the seller's permit, I guess, did not get
Well, let's
put in
let's
there.
let's
But
talk about
the tax ID number and stuff got ran in the office in there on
Hang-
the 7th.
Hang on. Did you bring your seller's permit that day?
I had all the
Did you-
information.
Did you hand her the seller's permit?
Yes.
You did?
Mm-hmm.
So it's,
The guy in the planning department,
but
in the office.
but for whatever reason that you don't know, she didn't input the seller's permit or take it from you?
I don't know what happened. All the other information that I had got through, but the one piece of paper didn't.
And you picked up this document at my office on September 1st?
Yes.
Okay. So you had the document.
Yeah, I got it on the first.
I wanted to ask you, we're going towards, there's one thing that wasn't pointed out here, Your Honors, and that was that there was 9 complaints. Letters were written, but they were somehow not put into the report. I find that hard to believe. If there's going to be evidence that my person's done wrong or is doing wrong, the complainants ought to speak up. But be that as it may, how many neighbors would you say live on your road?
I haven't gone all the way down, but I would say no more than 10, 15 the tops. I live on it's a private road. Blue Ridge Road is a private road.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you, have you had any complaints from neighbors since July of 2016?
Not about,
How about before that? Any complaints?
I haven't heard of any, no.
Okay. On September 28th, did the county come and inspect your property?
Yeah.
And were you there at the time?
No. What was it?
Okay. How did you know they were there inspecting the property then?
One of my workers told me that they were there.
Did you also talk to an
Yeah.
officer on the phone?
Yeah, I spoke with somebody on the phone. And they told me that they were there to do an inspection. And
Okay.
told
All right.
them, okay.
So then they did their inspection, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who did you talk to right after the inspection?
My employee, he told me the couple things that they wanted. I guess he verbally told me the couple things that they wanted to be fixed, like the back fence, and the officer, he told me he wanted the screen shade to be in the front of the property when you're driving by. And he had to move one pot or something, just like simple things. And the posting wasn't up. Just simple things that they wanted me to fix.
Okay. So did they give you any documents or leave any documents at your site after their inspection?
I never got one, no.
Okay, so you've never seen anything in writing. Specifically, what did the inspectors tell you they wanted corrected? You said something about a fence around the grow?
Yeah, the back half of the fence, like they were talking about, wasn't finished.
Okay, what
The
else?
process, but-
What else? A plastic,
Yeah, that was a plastic, and there was an opening that we were walking in and out of that we fixed with the fence.
all right. And did you put a cloth around to
Yes,
make
and so we put a shade cloth up on the, well, we built the front gate with the gate, and then we T-posted down along the side of where the officer wanted. And we were going to put up a screen shade, but the county came out with a letter saying that we couldn't have the screen shade up there because it was blocking the gutters, the drainage gutter. So we removed the fence and then we just screened the grow. Like I originally wanted just to screen the fence of the grow, but the officer told me that he wanted to screen in the front. So I did the screen in the front, and the county came out saying, giving us a letter saying we had to take it down.
Okay, hang on. Does council understand what he's talking about there?
I'm a little confused.
I just, when you stated that they gave you a letter telling you to remove it, earlier you said you got nothing from the county in writing.
Well,
But now
I
you're saying
don't-
you got a letter.
Well, my employees told me they gotten a letter when the county showed up after the fact that we were in the process of building that. We just T-post in a screen shade. We're pounding in T-post and putting up a screen shade along the road, so when you drive by, less visible to see.
Okay, but if you got a letter, then you know.
I didn't receive the letter. They brought it to the property owner. So, I mean, I'm not sure what happened to the letter, honestly. I personally never seen it or received it. I just got word on the phone from my employee.
Did they say if it was from code compliance?
I'm not sure who they said it was from. They just said the county left us a paper saying that they want us to take down the shade cloth that we put up. So I said, okay, take it down. And we'll just put the shade cloth around the fence.
So it could have been a neighbor down the road?
I'm not sure.
I mean, we don't know.
I'm not
We
sure.
don't
Yeah,
know.
just going off what they told me. They said that the county gave us a paper saying that they wanted the fence down, so we took it down.
Originally was going to have it put up, and with the shade cloth, because it was going to impede on
The drainage.
If you want to pass that around, that's what he's talking about.
The front.
See, Kelly, you good?
Okay, sorry.
Just relax.
I just
What
wanna-
I'm passing around to council is, there was a road on top of the ranch, and he was going to put a fence up there with a screen that would prevent anyone from the road looking down on the garden. But somebody
That's what they wanted me to
said
do.
it's going to impede on the drainage ditch, so remove it. So he removed that. That's what he's referring to. Now,
That's up at the front of the property.
okay. Did you make all the improvements that you were required to make under the,
Yes, I did.
and when did you make all the improvements?
A week or two, or a week or two after they came out.
So that would have been during the first 2 weeks of October?
Yes.
All right. Did you,
October, yeah, maybe the end of, yeah, but yeah, around October, end
Okay.
of October.
did you call the county and let them know that you had made those improvements?
No, I did not.
And why didn't you?
My season
Did-
was already over.
Well,
Everything was already done.
Did you know you were supposed to call them?
No, I didn't know. No, I didn't know. I just made the changes and that was it.
And again, you never received any kind of documentation from that inspection?
No, nope.
Okay. Did you ever think to call the county that you had made the corrections?
I should have called the county, but I just figured everything was already done. All my plants were already done. Everything was done, so I just
Okay.
let it go.
Did you ever hear from the county after the inspection?
No, the only thing I ever heard after was, I didn't even get a letter of I just heard from the property owner that they gotten a letter from code compliance.
Okay. So in fact, the county issued a notice of abatement on November 3rd, 2016. Is that true?
Well, I've never received it, but the property owner sent me a picture of it, yes.
Okay. When was your harvest complete on November 3rd, 2016?
The harvest was already completed when I received the letter.
Okay. On that notice, the only violation at the time was a canopy size stating it exceeded the permitted area. Can you explain what they may have meant by that? Well, better question, how big was your canopy area?
I occupied pretty much a 100 by 100 area.
And it's in the exhibits that I passed on to council. There's a picture in there of the garden, right? And that picture just...
Well, it's empty. That picture's empty because I've already been done with, the grow was already done in that area, those pictures.
Okay. The notice also said your permit was denied. Do you know why?
Permit.
Is that the first time you heard that your permit was denied?
The only thing I've ever really heard that was denied was I was already done, season was already over, and the property owner contacted me saying that code compliance sent us a letter that's saying of abandonment.
Okay, so in summary, the no posting, did you fix the no posting problem?
Yes, I put a board up and I laminated the sign and put it up.
Cultivation partially visible, did you fix that?
Yes, if you can see in the pictures in there, it shows it from the front of the road. There was an existing gate that we took down there, but you can clearly see, if you just look straight into that picture, that you can't see anything there anymore.
Why was the gate down?
Because we were told to take it down.
Okay. By who?
I don't know. They said the county, but I'm not sure,
All right.
honestly. I'm
Uh,
pretty sure it was the county.
Were your cultivation setbacks within 75 feet of the?
Yes, yes, the 75 feet limit is, they had complaints about one pot or something, and we took care of that.
Thank you very much. Does the council have questions?
If any other complaints that they had, I taken care of it. Anything that they asked me to do, I try to follow by the rules and take care of the things that I need to get done,
Any
be
questions?
in compliance.
Are you not on the, is your mailing address on your registration application?
Yes,
No, Marconi?
it has my home address too. I never received a letter. I got one letter from, to the hearing date today, yes. That's the only letter I've received.
Where's your home address?
So the,
The home address is in Sacramento. So I put that one on there as well.
so the notice of denial was sent to your home? Or was it
From
sent?
code compliance?
Yeah.
No.
Oh, no, not
only way
code
I figured
compliance, the
out.
planning department.
It was sent to your home.
Yeah, it was sent to your home or your mailing address.
Correct.
Was there anything that you have received that was sent? Sorry, did I interrupt?
The funny
No,
thing
it's
is,
okay.
yeah, the
That was
only,
sent, that was
Let him
sent to, the landowners.
Yeah.
address. What was that
Notice
exactly?
of
I'd like
abatement.
you to repeat
yeah, that was
for
the
me.
notice of abatement, or the,
Notice
On
of
November
abatement.
3rd,
from code compliance.
and that's what you gave to me. That was a notice of abatement on November 3rd, and that's when he came and saw our offices.
And that was only like a day or two before I could appeal it. I almost lost, because I've never received a letter saying that I was even getting that form or anything. So luckily, the landowner contacted me within the last 2 days, and luckily was able to appeal it.
And your employees, I'm confused by something that you said earlier and then what he's talked about, but you're saying your employees were notified by code enforcement on scene?
Yeah, when they showed up to do the inspection, yeah.
More than
My
once?
worker was there, yeah.
More than once?
No, just one.
Just once.
Just once?
Yes, sorry.
Just once. Was
Yes.
that September 28th?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
The one time?
Just one.
Okay.
So, the fence issue.
So pretty much I fixed everything you guys asked me to do.
Hang on, let him talk.
The fence issue.
Sorry.
There was another time you were claiming that you're not sure who was. Someone talked to one of your workers
Yes.
and the gate issue. Am I correct on that? It's kind of confusing to me. I'm
No,
trying to
okay,
catch up.
the back half of the gate is around the grow. That wasn't finished. And the gate that they took down was in the front of the property that we had
Right.
set up.
What was the date supposedly that your workers were let know that the drainage was being blocked by the
Yeah,
fence?
That's the question.
that was
Question.
recent.
How?
That was recent, like a couple weeks ago.
Are you clear with code compliance right now? Have they signed
Yes,
off on
yes,
all your
yes.
improvements?
Yes, when they sent the paper out to me, my garden was already finished. There was nothing there. All I do was take pictures and send it in.
Well,
So I wouldn't get charged
understand that
$1,000 a day.
You're finished, you know, you cleared out. But code compliance sent you a letter that you have in possession that says that you took care of all the problems with code compliance.
No, I've never received a letter from them saying I took care of everything.
Did you
You sent the
send
email.
in pictures to
But I
them
sent the email in, yes. Yes,
proving that you taken
yes,
care of all
yeah, I
these
sent the
issues?
email in already.
He sent that in about just a day before the fines were to kick in. So that would have been around November 13th.
A day or two before, yeah, the fines were kicking in.
It's
I
November-
sent the email in to them.
17th is what I see here from you. So you've been personally on with Reba Davis? Reba
Yes.
Davis?
Yeah, I sent her an email. I sent her an email of none of the plants that were not, she wanted to see a picture of no remaining plants. Or
Okay.
else they were gonna charge me $1,000 a day.
Right. I have an email copy from Reba A. Davis here, who's with our code compliance, as far as I know. I've never met her personally. Going down to third paragraph, as of 11/17/16, that's November 17th, I personally have not received any form of proof of abatement from Amin or his attorney?
I've tried contacting her. I left her several messages to see if the email went through, and no one ever got back to me. I left several messages, 3 or 4 messages with her, telling her to contact me. I was just curious to see if she even got the emails. I know I sent the emails. I can show you the email. I might have it on my phone.
Why don't you do that, just to give them comfort?
He's checking.
If it's
Are you-
okay, if he
Are you checking
can-
for the emails?
Yes,
He-
I got it on
Okay.
my phone probably.
Yeah.
I advised him that he had to do it. He called me that day and said he sent the email. I gave him the email address. I also spoke with county counsel, a gentleman. County counsel, there's a partner.
There's probably me. I'm Ethan here.
Okay, yeah. And we talked a bit about his case and one other. And I had mentioned that we had sent in,
I had a lot of conversations.
No problem. but let him show you. I guess while we're waiting, if I may conclude, honorable members, we believe the county has acted a bit overzealously with our client. He's attempted to be a good steward of the county and has done his best. The young man is not sophisticated as a businessman, but as a farmer, he's been complying and being a proper farmer using the right kind of ingredients, not growing 300 plants, staying with the 100 by 100 confines. He's tried his best to follow the rules and regulations of the county, which have been a little bit muddled, as you all know, and why we're here today. Denial of the permit would be unwarranted, I believe. It will put his nonprofit at risk of being denied a state license with MRSA and ALMA, the new laws that will be coming into effect in 2018, whereby if you have a violation or a sanction, it's going to give you a hard time getting a state license, and without, he'll be forced to be omitted from the application process. Just a moment. We asked the wise counsel to ponder on whether or not the client should, our client fits the description of a drug lord, or if he's a farmer that's trying to work within the confines of the county, providing medicine to his patients through his nonprofit. And we would ask, most importantly, that you consider the equitable argument here. You do have the power and the authority to do what's right, what's just, what ought to be done. And here we have a person that was substantially in compliance of everything, and when he wasn't in compliance, he did the magical thing. He became compliant. So I say you reward him rather than punish him. Thank you.
I got the email right here.
Where? Matt?
Would it be okay if I ask a question?
Yes.
If you want to go all the way to the top, it says R. Davis on the top.
Says the date.
If you go all the way to the top, you see her name at the top.
Mr. Abdullah?
Her name's at the very top.
Yeah, I see the date.
It
Mr.
says it's
Abdullah?
dated November 9th.
Miguel has a question, go ahead.
Just for the sake of clarity, 'cause, the appeal letter was a bit confusing for myself. You mentioned October 28th being a second site inspection, and some of the events that you just talked about, you claim that happened October 28th, not September.
That was a Scrivener's error.
So it's just a simple...
Don't punish me for that, please.
No, I was just wondering for the sake
Yeah,
of clarity.
it was only the 28th.
Okay.
My fault. I had mentioned 2 dates, that was incorrect.
I have a question. You mentioned that somebody you thought from the county said that a fence that you were either going to put up or did put up would impede on a drainage ditch?
Yeah.
Correct. On the road, there's a road that goes above the land, and he put a fence up there with a screen to prevent people from seeing in, and somebody, he says from the county, said that's impeding on drainage or...
Yeah, they said there's something about the gutters.
Told them to
They
take
go
it
in there
down.
and they clean the gutters or something. I don't even, I personally didn't, that's what my employee told me. He told me some guy came out here, maybe from the county, he said some guy came out here and told me that we cannot have this fence here because it's blocking
It's not county road.
the gutter.
And he'd put a lot of money into that fence and effort, trying to comply.
All right, it's not a county maintained road.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So at that point, either there's confusion on who told them that, or someone.
I'll see if I can get the, I'll see if I can get the paperwork.
Don't interrupt, never interrupt.
Okay. It's a private road.
There may be other
Right.
questions. Is there anyone else with us today that wants to address the planning commission on this appeal? Sir?
My name's Greg Stapleton. I signed in already, but I was here actually the day that he turned his stuff into, and I was actually present that same day. So I've seen him in the offices. So I'll vouch for him that he turned his stuff in that day.
September 7th, you're
Yeah.
talking about that day?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, they did something in the office, man. They ran my tax ID number in the office that day on the 7th. In the, I forget what offices it is in this next building right here. On the 7th.
Okay. That's good.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because this is completely confusing because you're surprised? I can be confused. He states that by the time code compliance came back to do inspections, he was done cultivating and removed everything. So looking at this today, what violations are we looking at?
We're looking at the fact that when code compliance went and did an inspection, there was significant violations of the code. Code compliance typically informs whoever's there, tells them, hey, this is what's in violation. I'll give you 10 days to fix it up. It took them a month before they never, well, according to Reba, they never submitted proof by a month later that they had fixed all these violations.
Do you know if today code compliance has cleared his issues?
To my knowledge, Reba has said no, that she hasn't received any proof.
Yeah, I have Rita's file right here, and she indicates the last thing that happened was 11/9. She spoke to Mr. Abdullah, and she gave him the email address. I will say, however, it has occurred where people have emailed in their photographs and it went into Sabrina's or Rita's trash box, and sometimes they're discovered sometime later. So it's possible that his email was sent and it's just not noted in the file. But as it stands, the code file is still open, and as far as Reba knows, fines are still approved. And so, and if she finds that email in your inbox, in her trash box, it'll backdate the
Thank you.
It's the middle time.
Yeah, I
Okay,
was
well-
gonna say, 'cause even when I got the email, there was no, even in those pictures, there's still no plants in those pots.
Okay, let her
Okay,
talk.
and then I guess my next question is that this packet references 9 complaint letters from neighbors, but they're anonymous.
Yes, I have them right here if you'd like them.
No, I don't want to see them.
Okay.
I mean, they're anonymous.
The
This
ones,
is a public hearing.
the copies I have do have their signatures. They just, if they don't want their names thrown out.
Okay,
I mean, if that's an issue, then I could take the letters back and not
no, that's
deal
fine.
with them.
I just wanted clarification as to how that worked, because I've not seen anonymous letters come through like that before.
Yeah.
So I wanted clarification. If this is a public hearing, it seems to me that if you're going to make the complaint, you have to back the complaint up. It's not fair for people to come through and
And
do.
I informed them that, it'd have more weight if I presented who it was. They, prefer to be anonymous out
I'm
of fear
good.
of safety.
So right now, we don't even know where this stands, except for we didn't have a seller's permit by the 7th
Correct.
in your possession. The other issues were code compliance issues that had the ability to be cleared up or pay fines, correct?
Correct.
So those,
We're kind of in limbo.
We still have the fence issue. I mean, if he had screening, that's fine, but under 17.95.16510, an outdoor mixed light cultivation area shall be fully enclosed with a 6-foot tall fence of material and strength that reasonably prevents against access to trespassers and children.
okay, but that's a
That's a
code
code
compliant
compliance
issue,
issue.
not a denial issue of an application.
Thank you.
Well, I mean, to pass the site inspection, you would have that in place. And if you don't pass the
But the site inspections by code compliance?
well,
Yes.
yeah.
So
At that
after,
point- At that point, right now, we've just, sorry, Lisa, go and finish. But, okay, at that point, we just conferred that there is a possibility that he may have sent the remedy in, but the email could be in a trash bin somewhere, for all we know. I mean, he did,
Sorry.
Yeah, that's possible. I mean, I suppose, I mean, if he built a 6-foot fence, I mean, did you build a 6-foot fence that would?
My garden is enclosed.
Hang
My
on.
garden is
Hang on.
enclosed with a
I-
6-foot
the-
fence and screening.
The documents I gave you show a beautifully
Right,
enclosed
we saw
6-foot
that.
screen fence.
The screen.
Okay, so I'm just, I want to talk here for a minute, if you don't mind. If you, and I'm just trying to get really clear on this code compliance situation, because if you don't put the fence up within the 10 days, does code compliance say, okay, your permit's being denied, you're done, or you continue to get notices to fix it? How does that work? Because if he's just getting notices to fix it and fines, that's not a reason for denial.
The code compliance division will
That's a good point.
provide a punch list of corrections that need to be made.
But that's a question. Did they provide a punch list? Because in writing,
Do you have a punch list listed?
No, they did not. What happened is planning denied the application on October 27th. Then on November 3rd, a notice of violation was issued because cultivation was occurring without pending registration.
so, but if they visited on September 28th,
That's what I
and they
have.
identified their punch list, which is here in this internal use only, when did they give this list in writing and saying you have 10 days to remedy?
There was no such letter. The notice of violation was your cultivation registration was denied and must cease and abate all cultivation immediately.
But that was a month later,
That was
October 27th, right?
No, November 3rd, yeah.
Okay, so the only,
So we made the assumption that compliance, code enforcement had provided improvement requirements to the cultivator or his representative, the employee you have on site, either verbally or in writing. It certainly would be better if it were in writing. And I don't know what time frame was provided to make those corrections.
Well, we heard
Ten-
10 days.
10 days is the standard. There was a time period where the code enforcement team did not specify a specific time frame. We said, no, we have to do that. So this could have fallen into that category. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of documentation to support what code compliance may have done, may or may not have done. And then, part of it's going to be a judgment call on the part of the code enforcement officer. If there are immediate, safety issues, they would have to be fixed immediately. If there are, some minor things, there's sufficient time to do it. A reasonable amount of time to fix the problem, and then identify either calls back out for inspection or submit photographic evidence that it's been repaired. It's the standard practice. I don't know if that occurred here. After a month, we had determined that we didn't have the seller's permit. We went to the file and saw this other, the violation notification from code enforcement to us, and said, well, not only does it have the seller's permit, but we apparently didn't fix any of these problems because we don't have any record of it having been fixed, and so therefore that was the basis of our denial.
okay, so on the seller's permit issue, earlier, we had the same issue come up, where he does have a seller's permit, it is properly dated pre-September 7th, not turned in to you. And this was the same scenario as earlier where I said, we don't make policy here, we follow the ordinance, and the Board of Supervisors need to set policy for, or intent for our planning department so that that can be worked out. So once again, now we have an issue where we have another hearing before us where we're going to have to say, do we want to go back and do we want to rewrite the resolution to match up to, okay, it was pre-September 7th, we've decided we're going to allow this to happen.
This has some other issues.
It does have other issues, but the other issues have no resolution in this room today because we don't know what code compliance has on their records. We don't know if code compliance ever got his emails and photos with resolutions that he can prove are on his phone sent to her. I don't know how you make a decision on this appeal today without a lot of follow-up, getting his email re-forwarded to Rita, I believe it is, finding out where we are with all these code compliance issues. I mean, if they went over that 10-day period, and if that is in writing, that that's a reason to deny, it would be good to know that here today. If code compliance says, okay, 30 days later, now you're getting cited, but we're not shutting you down, what is the policy set up on the code enforcement side? I think I need those answers to make a proper decision here today.
I concur with Lisa on that 100%.
We're not getting the full picture here.
Well, and there's a missing box in here.
There's a
And-
lot of missing.
I know, but the biggest missing box is this timeline for code compliance, and that is, do they send a letter? Do they tell you what the problems are? That once they're remedied, what the problems are, what the time frame is for resolution, and what action needs to be taken in order to
I think
clear those.
if we had those answers, we could probably make decisions. But I think without those answers, we're in limbo.
Without a system operationals, procedure and setting, or whatever you want to call it.
And just to clarify, just for the sake of it, on the day I wrote the denial letter, I did email Reba and I asked her specifically, is there any updates with this specific file? And she said no updates whatsoever.
What date was that?
October 27th.
Okay, he communicated with her on November 9th.
Yeah.
There's another email from Reba to Miguel on November 17th. As of November 17th, that person would not receive any form of proof of abatement from Mr. Amin or his attorney.
Well,
Okay, but
and again, but what you've also said is that it could be in some email
It's
trash file.
possible. Yeah, it's possible.
Because you're, on your phone, you're showing that you sent
Since
it.
November 9th on my phone, everything else is fixed, the fence,
See,
everything else is done.
I think the biggest problem here, forgive me for being rude, but it's just me.
No worries.
You're not communicating with code enforcement. And if I were you, I wouldn't be standing here. I would have been in code enforcement, getting documentation, walking it in, getting it signed off. It's like, I got my crop, I don't care until next year when it's important. So that's causing a lot of problems with lack of communication. I mean, I wouldn't want to pay those fines, but obviously you don't care.
I emailed and I called several times, nobody never got back to me.
But
Yeah.
that's at the point where you should have panicked.
Well, and here.
I've already
the-
sent the email and I've called, yeah, you're right, I should have looked forward into it more, but there's only so many times I can
Here's
call
where
and
the
leave a
written
message.
word is really important.
That's it. Written word,
Documentation.
documentation.
On
We live
paper.
by that.
And it's
I'm-
good to
Old,
have that
everything-
old school, old school really
I'm trying to
live and
counts.
die
comply.
by it.
I'm complying with all the rules. You guys tell me to fix the fence, I fix the fence. I know,
Well,
I
we
try
just
to go
don't-
above and beyond and do the front gate, and I have to get taken down. So, I mean, I'm trying to comply, I'm trying to do right. I got all my paperwork done, everything that you guys asked me to do, I got done.
So, okay, I'm going to go back to Peter. Peter, at this point, with a lot of things unclear, can this be continued
Certainly,
and to a certain date?
yes.
To next, our meeting.
And it's too late for the 22nd because
No,
those,
we
It's not
continue
new.
it to a date certain.
we can continue it to the 22nd.
Yes.
I would like to do that. I don't know what my other commissioners feel.
I think that's a good idea in my opinion, and that will give you time to start getting some documentation going with Reba.
So, should just go in there and talk to her and show her the email?
And get things
I don't
right.
care what you do. All I got to tell you is there's
Depends
stuff
on
before
what-
us that can cause you to be denied your permit in the
I
future.
understand.
I would have as much documentation before this planning commission. And I would get it to them to circulate to us way before the 22nd. So we have time to read it and study it.
Okay.
And we also might have some further
Yes.
findings on the, since we've deferred the
Seven.
seller's permit till the end, we might have some resolution on that, whether there may be, resolution on that issue about timelines for the seller's permit too.
Did you want to say something, Kelly?
Yeah. On the seller's permit, it looks like there's just a conflict in the evidence because planning department says they didn't get it, and the applicant says, I turned it in on September 7th. I
Yeah,
don't
but his
know.
dates
It
are
was here,
conflicting
too.
on that. I'm not so sure
The
how
same
that
day.
worked out because he says he was there one day, but he didn't have the permit in his hand that day. he didn't get it till later, so there's some conflict there for me. That's not straight up.
Well, there is a conflict, that's my point. But I
Yeah.
think his position is fairly clear that he did in fact turn it in on September 7th. That's what I'm hearing.
Can I ask a quick question? Did you actually turn it in September 7th? Because what you said earlier is that somebody went on the computer and looked up your tax ID.
That was all the business stuff too that I filled out as well. the
But you
same
actually
day.
handed
The
it
same
in.
day. Yeah, I did both of those the same day.
Who'd you give it to?
I'm not 100% sure.
Hopefully not the assessor's office, right? Because that's where the business stuff goes in, correct? So that could be,
Okay, that's just conflict. Now, my other problem is trying to understand how this ordinance works here. When I look at whatever it is, 165N, it starts off saying the following additional requirements apply to the registration of sites for commercial cultivation of medical cannabis. And then it has the requirements that we're familiar with about date stamped evidence of grading or cultivation and so forth and so on. The ones that are concerning us are 10 and 11, which are both under N, just like 3 is under N. And those have the requirements for a 6-foot-tall fence, et cetera, reasonable screening from public view, et cetera. I take those to be requirements applying to the registration, not just code compliance. And so therefore, I'm having a little difficulty understanding why it is that if somebody comes in to register and it turns out that they don't meet the requirements of 10 or 11, which is the fence and the screening, why that's a code compliance issue instead of a deny the registration issue. And if it's a deny the registration issue, that's the end of the registration, if it's not met. Why am I missing something?
Because the planning department does not go out and do these inspections. Code compliance does with law enforcement. So until code compliance goes out with law enforcement to verify these issues, you don't have any idea because it's not your job to go out and inspect, correct?
Well, the county has identified that the code enforcement personnel are the best people to do those inspections. I would agree with Mr. Wooster that the expectation is the fence is there. If it's not there, when on May 10th, then it better be done right away. And the purpose of the inspection is to make sure that these requirements are met. When it's not until September 28th that the inspection is made because of lack of personnel to do it, and it's not there, there's been 3 months, 4 months of time for the applicant to put in the required improvements. And then waiting until November 9th to document that the improvements are finally done. That, to me, is violation of terms of the ordinance. We rely on code enforcement to make that inspection, but it's based on how they comply with the ordinance. Just as any other code enforcement action is done, are they in violation of the terms of the zoning ordinance or other county code requirements?
Well,
So, yes, Mr. Rooster, you're right. There, again, the time frame is not specific as to when that was supposed to be done, but it was clearly the intent that you're not going to grow all season long without the fencing up there. The purpose of the fencing was to protect against trespass from children or youth or whoever else might fit in there and steal it. The screening was so people didn't have to see it from the street. Those are things that should have been done at the same time that he was busy irrigating and doing all the other things to make it grow.
Were receipts submitted with this application for fencing, as many other applications were?
I don't know.
well, it looks to me like the date by which this should have happened, in other words, the fence and the screening, is June 30th of 2016. That's the date when you submit your application, and these are requirements for for a registration. And so the fact that code compliance is sort of the inspecting arm here of the county, and that they don't get around to getting out there for good reasons till September 28th, doesn't change that June 30 date. And so it seems to me that this is a simple failure to comply with the requirements for registration, not an issue about whether somebody has remedied a code compliance violation. Am I right about
I
that?
would agree with you. I mean, we try to provide some flexibility, some, reasonable, to put the fence up, it's not quite what, we would expect. Fix this portion of it, your gate doesn't lock, fix it, if someone made a good faith attempt to screen and fence the cultivation site, then, we would give them an opportunity to make whatever minor corrections. If they just fail to do so, I would agree with you.
Well, there was a failure to do so all the way to September 28th.
I would,
But on September
I
30th, they're
would
telling him to
disagree.
take the fence down.
Well,
see,
We don't know who that was.
Yeah.
we don't know who that was, but
That's a
that
different
fence had
gate.
been there for
It's a
some
different
time,
fence.
and someone said that it was going through a drainage.
There's two different fences. One is in the front gate and one is around the crop.
When did you put your fence up?
Around the crop.
End of
Well,
October, you
we
said.
just couldn't finish it, was the thing. We had it
You-
up, it just wasn't finished.
When did you put the original fence up?
At least the partial part.
Way early, before.
Yeah, well, it was done, yeah, it just wasn't completed.
No, when?
A date.
That doesn't say.
Was it in April, May, June, July?
It was when we pretty much started, yeah, early in the early
Do you have
months.
receipts for that?
I'm mine somewhere.
Is the fence visible in these photographs?
Yeah, where would it be in those photographs on those
The
dates?
fence is visible in the photographs that I sent, that you
No,
guys
but
have
on
right there.
those, is there fencing
Just
there?
tell them April.
You clearly had a garden going there at that time.
Yeah,
Did you have it in place at all times when you had the garden there? The fence?
yes, for the most part, yes,
And when did you plant the garden?
before May 10th.
All right. And the fence up top on the street, when did you put that in, approximately?
A little after that, after May, June, like June or July or something.
So that was up for 2 or 3 months before they told you to take it down?
Yes.
All right. So he was attempting to comply, but he wasn't 100% where he needed to be, apparently.
And I've complied with everything else. I fixed the stuff that you guys told me to fix. The back half of the fence wasn't done. I fixed it. I put a screen shade around it. Just like you guys asked.
Up there at all.
These are all the exhibits for this hearing.
Yeah.
In the original
None of these photos are.
registration application, there was pictures, timestamps, turn in, proof of whatever grading
You had that.
If there was a grant.
prior to May 10th, everything else. Inside there, do you see any signs of a fence?
No, I don't. I have the pictures right here if you guys would like
Okay,
to.
I believe you.
Now,
But at that point, the garden started, and you do not see signs of the same fence that we see in these pictures right here that they've submitted here.
Not at all.
Even a few days after.
we were in the process of, well, at first you didn't need the fence, You guys told us to build the fence, so I built the fence. Pounded T-posts in and went and bought the 6-foot cages that you guys wanted, the rolls from Tractor Supply, and rolled it out. Pounded the T-post in, rolled it out,
But
put the
you-
shade cloth on there.
But there's no
It's
fencing.
a process, though.
There's no fencing here on the code compliance photos, right? Of September 28th.
September.
Right, there's no fencing, so it couldn't happen in June or July because there's hardly any fencing.
There was fencing, just not completed.
It didn't have the shading.
Right, there's no shading.
There was no shade, no.
Right.
I put that up after.
Yeah.
Well,
After
right, we
code-
understand that,
After
yes.
code compliance came out and told me that I
Right.
needed to put it up,
And
that's when I did it.
What Mr. Wooster's saying is that what he brought to our attention is that the requirements for registration for June 30th, so a complete application would be evidence of the fencing, of the screening, and of the noticing. That's was his point, which is a valid one.
I mean, it just seems to be the way the ordinance is set up. There are other things that are compliance issues, like posting the notice of registration. It's not part of the
Yeah.
requirement for a registration in the first place.
That's-
That's a code compliance issue. But these others that have been identified are not.
Correct.
So I don't know where we are on this.
But they are fixed now. They are completed. Fence is completed, the front gate is completed. I posted up the sign in the front of the gate, in front of the grow.
Right, understand that, but then a lot of people have completed their,
I turned in all my
Registration,
paperwork, paid all
yeah.
my fines.
right?
So just,
Don't interrupt.
Just saying, a lot of people have completed their registration requirements after the deadlines, and that's what they're appealing about, and
so,
same as you.
I think it's
Okay,
important
but I put
I think
in-
it's important to distinguish that being in place at the time of registration, which he had a fence, it was a crummy one, obviously, it didn't have the screening on it, but it was there. It was sufficient to get him registered. Now, code compliance says you need to improve it, and he improved it. That's not a question of denial in the beginning. He was compliant for purposes of registration. So now we got it, like Mr. Peter Moore says, you got to give him some time to get the thing repaired, and he did.
put in all
I
the
think you could also argue that the fencing and the screening are requirements, even if they were crumbing. If there's no screening, there's no screening, and that is a requirement, right? So he admits that there's no
I believe
screening.
that's an argument you
And
would
the-
make.
And the fencing, of 6-foot fencing, was partially there.
Mhm. I agree with you. That's why I ask you guys to use your equitable discretion and look at the totality of the circumstances here. We have someone that wants to comply. He's a good citizen, he's a resident. It's your call.
say I put in all this time, effort, and making everything right, all my money into this, and just to get denied for not having partially the fence fixed, and I fixed everything that you guys asked me to, is just, it's kind of discouraging that I'm just going to get denied because of half the fence that I didn't put up, but I put $60,000 worth of my money or money into this that I've been trying to comply and take care of, and just to get denied for not having the partial of the fence done and stuff like that is just.
One suggestion I might have is I'm one for winnowing down issues to the salient ones, and it seems as though the issue of the seller's permit is uncontroverted. We brought in his very testimony. We have the testimony of an audience member as opposed to the county's bare claim that it wasn't submitted. So perhaps the council in its wisdom would want to rule on that issue and take that off the table so there's less to deal with on the continued hearing.
So somebody seeing him at the county the same day does not mean he had what he needed to turn in, or I don't know what he turned in. Unless the gentleman sitting in the audience looked at his paperwork, we don't know that. Now, the fact that his seller's permit is stamped with the proper date on it before the 7th, that's good. I mean, that's a great start. I mean, the other 4 were okay with that earlier today. I think
When somebody brings in a seller's permit, do you make a copy and date stamp it and give it back to them?
We date stamp it, and for the most part, people would ask for copies. If a lot of people also say, no, it's fine, just date stamp it and make sure it gets in my file. That's the process.
So we would not automatically make a copy for the applicant, only if they requested it.
They might have made a copy already for their
Is
own
it-
use and just given you.
So a lot of these seller's permits, people just print it out that day, so they already have copies of them.
Right.
so.
But I went into the county and got mine in Sacramento, physically. Well, I sat down on the computer there. Somebody helped me through the process.
Right. So where are we?
We're at where I'm reading under 1795-240, and it's enforcement and costs, and it talks about the owner of any parcel which a nuisance has been found shall be responsible to pay it. Where the costs and penalties go unpaid beyond the 30 days, no appeal has been filed, and there is a valid registration for the parcel on which a nuisance has been found to exist, the planning director may take action to invalidate the registration. So they filed an appeal. So that delays the process, correct? I mean, because obviously this 30 days ago was a long time, but they did file an appeal which held them up for more time.
So this provision really applies to after you issue the registration. It talks about invalidating registration. So if we find there's violations after we've issued, there was sort of an assumption that we get through this a lot more quickly than we have been able to. That if we then found later on that there was a violation, they were notified and they didn't correct it, then you could take action to validate the registration. I suppose you could apply that to not approving one. You wouldn't approve something just to turn around and validate it.
Okay.
But
And the planning commission has in the past, in other parts of that section, applied the reasons for invalidation to not granting it in the first instance as
Right.
well. So, because it would be absurd to issue it only to revoke it. So I think there is precedent for that if that's what the planning
There is.
commission is thinking.
I'm just confused because it seems like there was, this is different than the other ones. Before, we were going and looking at the registration applications, you were looking at the maps, bringing it all forward. We can see clearly that the garden wasn't where it was supposed to be. It didn't look like it was on the right land. There were water tanks, things going on. This is different in that it's on the right land, and just took longer to get to reviewing this application. Is this the first review of the application, or did this just pop up now because on September 7th we didn't get the seller's permit? Did it make it through the first part of its review? When's the first time we reviewed this application? Now, or because of the September 7th deadline, or did we review it before and pass it?
I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty sure it came up because it was in the list of files that we did not receive all the documentation that we needed on September 7th.
And then that's when you saw the code compliance things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And once more, that's when I asked Reba if there had been any updates on it. And she said no.
Okay.
Well, I know for sure.
It's not appropriate to talk. It's all right. You're fine.
No, I
I
wouldn't.
know for sure. I emailed that to her because I didn't know. I didn't want to get charged $1,000 a day.
Yeah, that's,
If I have the
Lot of
proof, if
motivation.
I already have the proof that the stuff is already abandoned or
It's on your
taken
phone.
down. Stuff is already taken down. There's no reasons why I shouldn't have emailed her the pictures of.
Well, the
getting
reason that you
$1,000
should have
fine.
been concerned about emailing her the pictures
And I called
is because you were
numerous
never in
times
compliance
and left.
from May 10th, and you needed to be by June 30th. So to have to wait until somebody comes out and sees you to September to bring your property into compliance kind of says you rode 90 days of time out there.
Well, I was, it just.
So, I mean, I understand you're saying I'm going to come into compliance, but the only reason that you were is because of the $1,000 a day fine. If you were coming into compliance with your registration from the get-go, you would have been doing it in June.
Well, the $1,000 fine, they just wanted to see the plants chopped down. That's all they wanted to see. They didn't want to see the screening or anything. They just wanted to see the plants that were gone.
Your point's well taken.
Did I understand you correctly to say that, so far as you know, there was only one visit by code compliance, and that was September 28th?
Yes.
Sir.
And so the October 27 date that's in your appeal letter is not correct?
That was a Scrivener's error.
And that should read September 28th?
Yes.
Okay. Well, then who was it from the county that suggested to your client he had to move the fence because it wasn't code compliance?
We don't know.
It was just an extra fence anyways in the front, anyways, The shade cloth was already there around the original garden. This is the fence that they told me to take down is in the front of the property. It's just an extra fence.
So this fence isn't necessary for you to come into compliance?
No.
Okay, so it's kind of an irrelevancy.
Yeah, it was just extra that I wanted,
Okay.
extra shade cloth, because the officer suggested I should put it there.
Okay, well, was there another fence that was in compliance, 6 foot tall?
Yes, and that
Around
was
the
the back half
property.
of the fence that wasn't completed, and it's now is completed.
But it wasn't completed on
At the
September
time when they
28th?
came out,
Portion,
no.
a small portion.
Just a small portion, yes.
Was not completed on September
Yes, a small
28th?
portion was not completed. And they had asked me to finish it, and I finished it 2-3 weeks later. The only thing is I just never got back to code compliance. That's the biggest issue right now.
And on September 28th, is it true that your operation, your plants were visible from a public road?
Right?
Private road.
Well, okay, a road where other people than you have a right to go.
Yes.
Okay.
That's why you put that fence up.
Yeah, that's why I put the fence and the shade cloth up, and I tried to put the fence in the front of,
The code
Didn't work out.
compliance photo that you brought up earlier,
Yeah, there's no fencing and no screening.
And they took that from their car, and what's the date? None of these photos have
There is the date, there's the dates, it's the 28th, the day they were out there. It's like the page before.
Okay,
Right.
well-
Oh, it was September, yeah, it was September 28th when code compliance took the photos.
And there's fencing, but it's visible from the road. But they
Well,
did
yeah,
have
there's no
fencing.
screening, and then there's no fencing. It doesn't look like there's any fencing, maybe that's from the back.
Yeah.
And there's no screening.
Okay, but they did have fencing, just no screening.
Partial fencing.
Partial fencing.
Just wasn't completed.
It's not
Yeah.
complete
How much of
fencing,
it
it's
wasn't
partial.
completed?
All right.
Plastic netting on the backside.
Yeah, just the back portion, like
I
it
know.
stated in the,
I know we do, well, let's do
4 feet.
it, I'm just not.
do it.
Let's
for
do
two,
it.
maybe 2 T-posts.
I got one more question at least.
And just because we ran out, we don't.
On September 28th, cannabis cultivation site inspection report,
Yes.
there's a thing that says number of employees, and then what's written there is 1 DOG. What does that mean?
One dog,
One dog.
yes.
That would
The
not,
officer spoke with the dog.
okay, that's kind of what I thought it meant, but
I believe that's what Reba said.
I thought it might be some acronym for an actual human type employee.
No idea.
Well, isn't there like, there's a TV show called Dog, you know?
But I heard that there was an actual human type employee on the premises.
There was,
But it's not showing up in the inspection report.
That would be a question for Reba.
Were there two?
I believe there was 2. But one only spoke to them.
No wonder there was such sketchy information
Okay.
that was passed
Can we
between.
kind of close this up and bring it back to the commission to make some decisions? That would be great.
Yeah, thank you. I think we're gonna,
It's all yours.
thank you.
Thank you.
So generous of you. So we're gonna close the public hearing and bring it back for deliberation to the planning commission, so what's your pleasure?
Well, we always start with Kelly, so let's start there.
Well, I'm leaning towards denying the appeal because it's pretty clear that as of September 28th, the requirements for registration were not being met. I think admittedly so. And I think some confusion arose because it was code compliance that came out on September 28th, and people thought that if they fixed these non-compliances, their registration would be approved, as opposed to just not getting fined for being out of compliance. But it seems to me that the requirements for registration were not being met. On the seller's permit issue, I don't know that we need to resolve that, because I do think there's a conflict here. I think the applicant's saying, I turned it in on September 7th, and we don't have it. So that's where I am.
I definitely think we need to strike the seller's permit from the resolution. And I still have a lot of confusion, so I'm still on the fence about the fence. You do make a good point about it being part of the urgency ordinance and part of the May 10th deadline. I think the case here is to question whether or not he made a reasonable attempt at it. But then now thinking about it, nowhere prior was there any screening put up.
No screening, no.
No screening.
Fencing.
But the fencing was
Was the fencing
But-
on-
partially
We're-
there.
Unless you have a specific question, we have
Right.
closed the hearing.
Sorry. I apologize, Paul. There was no screening, partial fencing.
The dog ain't talking.
Go ahead, Lisa.
Okay, so I'm reading the reasons for denial. Current registration document issued by the planning department needs to be posted, and it wasn't. Reasonable screening from public view, never was there. Outdoor or mixed light cultivation areas shall be fully enclosed by a 6-foot tall fence. That probably was there. I can see it in a lot of the pictures, maybe not fully, but it was there. It just was not screened. I'm not even going to go towards the seller's permit because he has provided one that is dated correctly. There is testimony saying he was there turning in paperwork. I don't know if he did or not. I can't back that up. But based on 1795-165I and 165N11, I believe that, and based on those two conditions, I could go with both of those, upholding the planning department.
Ted?
I agree, 100%. I think there's enough evidence that it wasn't completed.
Well, and I confess, I was, I think Kelly really clarified the issue between code compliance and the requirements of the registration. And I think it is clear that the requirements for registration, particularly the fencing, even though it was partial, and the screening, which there were none of up until even with the photographs showing when code compliance was out there that wasn't completed, I think is evidence enough to show that the requirements for registration were not met. And I would concur with just removing the first evidence, which was the failure to provide the state seller's permit, because I agree it's not, I'm not certain what happened to that, but certainly the other two, the number 2 and number 3, which is code section 17.95.165 and .11 and .10 are relevant to this appeal, denial of the appeal.
I agree with that.
So we need to amend the resolution
Yes.
I would concur on that.
To eliminate the first finding, number 1. Okay.
If you want to add a finding regarding the posting of the registration documentation.
Well, is that part of the registration
That
requirement?
one's
No.
actually,
It's code compliance.
That's code compliance.
Is it in the urgency ordinance?
It is, but not as part of registration.
We can appeal.
It is part of the registration requirement.
Okay.
So it's clearly something I can't do until after they submit.
Right.
But it should have been done immediately after that posting, so that if
Well, that was the one I was quoting on 1.6.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Just
So-
up to you.
165I.
165I.
Correct.
Okay. So with those
you want
two
to do it next
amendments,
year.
one eliminating the first finding, number 1, and then adding the posting requirement, 165I.
And one other change at the very head of this resolution, the APN number is not right.
The APN number is not correct?
It should be 014-009-028.
It's really that wrong?
Yeah.
Oh,
Wow. Good catch.
did we get that?
Yeah,
Okay, all right, so would you read the recommendation?
so recommendation is to adopt or pass a motion to adopt the amended resolution that you guys spoke of right now. Resolution 2016-054, denying 2016-1118 appeal, and thereby upholding the planning director's determination to deny the application 2016-812.
Okay, is there a motion? As amended?
As amended, correct.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
That's crazy. So we got denied for a fence not being built up. After it's already been completed.
Is it a warning?
you can let them know about the appeal.
This action is final unless appealed
But it's gotta be
within 15 calendar days.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
So So we're going to take a quick 5 minutes, but it's really going to be 5 minutes. We are going to start promptly again at 3:30, what is that? 3:38. Are reconvened. Welcome back. Our next public hearing is 2016-1113, appeal of denial of commercial cannabis cultivation registration application for APN 052-017-084, Laura Sternick. And that's Miguel, that's you again.
Yes.
Okay.
Once more, this is Miguel, Planning Department. Today I'm here to present Laura Sternick's appeal to the Planning Commission. This appeal is pretty similar to a previous one we had where a registrant didn't technically get disqualified by the Sheriff's Department, but got disqualified for failure to disclose arrests/convictions. And this is the case with Ms. Sternick's. She filled out her background questionnaire. She failed to disclose a few arrests/convictions and was disqualified by the Sheriff's Department. In her appeal letter, she does say that she asked the officer that was conducting the background search. She did disclose that she had arrests, but she didn't know the penal codes for them. They told her it was fine and she would be fine, that those arrests weren't reason for disqualification. However, she didn't disclose all of her arrests and all of her convictions, and that's what led to this.
Okay. Any questions of Miguel?
No.
All right. Is Ms. Sternick here?
Yes. So, okay, so I am Laura Sternick, and I'm addressing the denial reasons in my appeal, being that, in a summary, just to begin this, I did on the report, which is attached to, I believe, all the papers that you have, that I did disclose I was arrested, 2 of the arrests. And there was actually a sheriff in here a little while ago who didn't realize who I was, but whatever, I asked him, when you get arrested, I just want to make it clear to you guys, when you get arrested for something, if you've never been arrested, you just get arrested. You don't get arrested for 5 things. But say you were drunk driving and your tire was flat or you're missing lug nuts, you might get arrested 1 time, but they might charge you with 3 things, you know? And so in reality, I was arrested 3 times in my adult life. This is all 28 to 30 years ago. The first time I was arrested, and if you've read the letter, which I'm sure you're real busy and you probably haven't, I wrote a letter to all of you. And so I was arrested for like a burglary, and I had received a Monopoly game and a doll. And so it was dropped to a misdemeanor. And so I've been reliving that during my career since then as a teacher and as a notary. And so I just wanted to bring to the attention that I did disclose these arrests, which is why on the Planning Commission's report, page 1 through 3, numbered, it said I failed the criminal background or failed to pass or disclose section 15AI, number 1, disclosed 2 arrests. The 3rd one was not disclosed due to the research in 2006 in which I did attach the letter that I wrote to the Teaching Credential Office that no available info at the Alameda County Sheriff's Office was available in 2006 for this arrest in 1980. So I did not disclose that. And then in review of page 3 of the staff report that was sent to me as part of the denial of my registration,
it said that, they did not want, this was due to, I did not disclose my criminal background. So biologically, I looked up what is criminal background, because am I a criminal? So biologically, definitely not a criminal. My father was a lawyer here. I ran his law office here for at least 12 years in Angels Camp and Murphy's. I have never been biologically a criminal. And am I a career criminal? Well, I think in the last 30 years, I have shown that building 2 houses in this county from the ground up without a builder, attending Stanislaus State University for 27 years, part-time, getting my AA degree before that, finishing that when I moved here. I have opened a landscaping business up here 30 years ago. I have employed several people in this county. I also purchased some land, historic property, and I've rebuilt 2 175-year-old houses. I learned all of this through reading and books without any criminal activity. I also in this county have, besides running my dad's law office for 10 or 12 years, I also opened a nursery on a historical piece of property in Copperopolis, which is pretty much failing, but then I opened a flower shop, and I'm a florist up here. So I have a landscaping business and a flower shop. I hold a benefit every year as the Haunted Barn of Copperopolis, in which we donate the money to, or I donate, because there is no we, but I donate the money to, I've donated it to science camps, I donated it to the fire victims last year, I donate the money to the public library. I have cleaned the highway along Highway 4 outside of Angels Camp for the last 7 to 8 years. I do not get paid, even though people think, oh, well, there's a sign, there's a profit for you in that. There is no profit, I can tell you, because when you adopt the highway, you have to prove to the state that the people that are helping you are under your workman's comp policy, which costs a lot of money. So I pay my employees to help me pick up that garbage. But it's passion. So how did I get into even wanting to grow this crap? I don't know, but I see it as a historic opportunity. I look at it as a part of history, like during the Prohibition. I was informed many years ago while on a tour with my parents that certain people obtained a license to grow hops, and those same families are still have sent that permit to grow hops from generation to generation down. So I thought maybe this is an opportunity, where I'm still digging holes, I'm still planting plants, I'm still fixing irrigation systems, I'm still driving 3,000 miles a month in this county to make it. And, I had several people tell me it was a waste of time to come here because you already were going to say no. But my father just died a couple months ago, and I found a letter the other day, and it said, I said to him, it was a letter I wrote to my father back in 2002. And I said, Dad, we got in this fight. And I said, you said I can't fight the world. But one thing I know, Dad, is I'm going to fight for everything I think is right. And if I have to fight the world, then that's what I'll do. So that's the reason I came here today. Not that it's that important that I get it, because I'm now rebuilding a trailer for my neighbor who owns a restaurant, and I'm trying to make a hot dog stand and open a hot dog stand. I work 16 to 18 hours a day, 7 days a week in this county. And, it took me 28 years with a permit to build my last house on Pool Station Road, where I'm asking for this permit. But because I had a fake divorce, because I was not really married for 17 years, and I had to move there, I had to finish the house, but I have my father buried there, I have my husband buried there, who died in this county in a car accident. It's the place where I'm going to live for the rest of my life. So I already realized, that in the last year, since I got diabetes and a number of other things, I'm 60 years old now. These arrests happened when I was 20. So it seems like I looked up on the internet back there where I was sitting here since 9 o'clock, like how many presidents were arrested for something before they became president. Well, I found 3 or 4. We all make mistakes. And I'll tell you that, this Troy guy who came up first and was waiting for a decision, that was so cool that his neighbors all came together for him. But I could tell you, I am not Troy, and my property is actually under a code compliance problem right now. Nothing to do with the marijuana thing. It's all to do with, I have a lot of vehicles because my husband and I rebuilt cars. So since I got my code compliance complaint letter, I also work on cars. My father made me take 4 years of auto shop in high school. So I have now repaired 4 of the cars out there and got them licensed and registered and insured. And I'm working on the other ones. I have all kinds of nursery supplies. Well, besides my father dying in the last 2 years, before I applied for this, there was a fire. And the fire wasn't the Butte fire, but it happened right before that. The fire was the Catholic Diocese of Stockton started a fire on the other side of Hunt Road. And it came down and it burnt. And this was right after my fake divorce from my fake boyfriend, who was like my husband for 17 years. Burnt 30 years worth of irrigation supplies, tires off of all the cars. I have pictures on my cell phone, and I am now suing by myself without an attorney because I have no money, really. I just run businesses. I am suing the Catholic Church. And, so I'm still working on putting back up fences, getting the cars going, and moving a lot of the burnt stuff. And besides that, after that happened, my caretaker who had been up there before I even had power, because I built that house without power, I built it with a generator, his trailer caught on fire and he died the other year. So all this stuff, I'm like a calamity of errors. But, the only reason I even got into this at this time to start growing was because my father, who would be 91 years old in January, just died in June, and he got hit when he was a young man by a Greyhound bus in New York while he was in the Army. And he had terrible arthritis, and it was killing him. And I was driving back and forth to the Bay Area 2 or 3 times a day because my father needed me to turn on the TV, change the remote control, one thing after another. And, he needed something for the pain. So one of my brothers actually suggested to him, to try the marijuana. So he got a thing for a license. So it was a lot of money. And even though he was a lawyer, he was more like a lawyer that didn't hardly charge people, I guess.
There aren't very many of those.
Yeah, he didn't save really any money.
Hey,
And,
Laura,
I paid for his cremation.
Laura, could I kind of focus you?
Sure, because I do trail.
Okay, so can you just focus on, because I think that I don't think that we're here to talk about the arrest. It's about the disclosures of the arrest. That's really the issue.
Yeah, and you'll see that it is on my application. I disclosed the 1989 and the 1979. But I didn't disclose the 1980 but they said 7 arrests, but it was only 3. And that's the 2 I disclosed, and the one I didn't in 1980 is actually the one that, when I went for my teaching credentials, because, you know, I had to go through a lot to clear myself for that, I went to the sheriff's department in person in Alameda County trying to get what I was arrested for. And they said that that was so old and it was a misdemeanor and it was dismissed that they had no record of it. So I didn't even think of putting it down. But I knew I'd been arrested in 1979 and in 1989.
Well, I think in your application, you listed one as in 1987 and 1979, but they're failed to put the 1978.
Well, I think that the difference in the dates, I think like they're reading it as it's 1989.
Well, there's
I
that
know
one
it was
too.
1989, and there seems to be like a, you know, if you could look closely, I changed the date from 88 to 89. And the date difference in the 79, it's more like when they arrest you and then when you're convicted. You know, because you could be arrested in 78 and not get convicted till 80. You know, that's what the difference of dates is. But if you read my description, it's the same thing. You know, I was arrested for burglary in 1979. For armed robbery, actually, I was looking at a prison sentence. I was 19 years old, 18 years old. And all I had was, I hadn't worked and I wanted to get my, anyways, I bought a Monopoly game and a doll for my little sister from someone, and it was stolen property. And I was arrested as being the person that stole a whole truckload of stuff. So
that was in 1979.
Right.
And then you had the 1987 Under the Influence.
The 1989 is 89. It was never a 1987.
Okay, well, maybe
I
that's...
put 1988 and then I changed it to 1989, but it looks on the paper like 1987. And I was up here, and that's when, if you read my letter, I went for my job I always wanted, which was with the forestry department. And it was for hooting for a spotted owl. And when I hooted, the guy told me, you know what, for you to really get on with this forestry department, you either got to be good looking or you have to have more education. So I wasn't good looking, so I applied to Stanislaus State. And to do that, I had to go down and get my transcripts from Chabot.
Oh, I think we're
Yeah, so-
moving and...
Well,
Okay.
I think I explained what happened
Okay.
to me, but,
Yes.
you know, I mean, it's an excuse. I had the crap in my car from someone else, but actually, when I did go to court, and believe me, it was quite an embarrassment because...
So, I'm sorry, Lori, I'm going to interrupt you for a second, please. We're not judging you here today. What we're doing is looking at the application you filled out. The question was to write down any and all arrests, not convictions, arrests. And we're looking at what you listed compared to what actually came back. So I don't want you to feel like behind the mic there you have to justify any and everything, because nobody's here judging you. All we're doing is following the rules of the ordinance. So
I did, in fact, disclose 2 of the arrests, because I was only
But
arrested...
were there 3?
3 times. Well, the one time when I was arrested and I was let go, I didn't include that. And so that shows, like, I wasn't deceiving you.
How many times were you arrested?
I guess now 3 times.
Okay, perfect.
I was never taken to jail.
Doesn't matter. That's not what we're asking you, and we don't need you to make excuses. That's not what we're looking for. So we're just trying to stay on track here because we have a whole bunch of hearings behind you, and it's already 4 o'clock. We'll probably be
Oh, I
until
know.
7 or 8 o'clock tonight. Hope you stay
No,
and join us.
we will not be there. We will not be here that long.
It ain't looking good.
So let's see if anyone else wants to weigh in on this, Laura.
Okay,
And then, well, so you might want to take your seat, and maybe we'll have more questions for you.
okay.
Okay. Is there anyone else?
I do have a letter from a neighbor, non-anonymous, who actually signed it or put their names. Can I pass it around?
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to beat you up.
Sure. And is there anyone in the audience that would like to?
What do I do? Don't look me, Dennis is mad at me.
Good afternoon, Jim Macedo from the Sheriff's Office. Just going to provide a little clarity. Item number 1, I believe you all have the application packet, list any and all arrests or formal charges with or without disposition for any criminal offenses within the United States or any other country, civilian or military. And it states, and it is a little difficult to read, and it appears to be 1989 dash under the influence dash Livermore, California. Just below that, 1979 petty theft. Question number 2, are you now or have you ever been on probation, parole, supervision from any other state for a conviction of any offense, including traffic? If yes, please explain. 1979 theft dash Alameda County. The background investigation conducted by the Sheriff's Office revealed 1978 arrest for 459 of the Penal Code, 496 of the Penal Code. 459 is burglary. 496 is receiving known stolen property. That was a felony conviction that was later reduced and dismissed. 1980, which was a separate second arrest. 11359, which is possession of marijuana for sale, dismissed. 11378, possession of a controlled substance for sale, dismissed. That's other than marijuana. 11377, possession of a controlled substance, convicted, misdemeanor. Third arrest, 1989, Livermore, California. 11377 of the Health and Safety Code, possession of a controlled substance, convicted, misdemeanor. Can I provide any further clarifying answers to any questions anybody may have before I take a seat?
Yeah, where she has the 1979 arrest for petty theft listed, it looks like that's probably actually the 1978 one that showed up on your report, right?
Correct.
And so the one that didn't get disclosed in any way, shape, or form was 1980, which wound up to being a conviction, actually.
Correct. One of the 3 charges related to a conviction. However, I do want to clarify, she listed petty theft in 1979. Normally, that's a misdemeanor. The 1978 arrest was a felony burglary and felony possession of stolen property, so it's inconsistent with what's in the background report that was completed by the applicant.
Okay, but we clearly have one arrest in 1980 that wasn't disclosed, and I think Ms. Sternick agrees she didn't disclose it.
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions of Captain Macedo?
Is Captain Macedo, are you allowed to speak to these?
Those were received by the planning department, not myself.
You're not familiar
I
with
could
this?
read it if you like, but I believe the planning department is more familiar with it than I am. I've not seen it.
I just received this letter yesterday.
So it's a neighbor stating that there's been people arrested on her property since they started growing and that they've been armed. So they have gone and purchased guns themselves to protect themselves?
I would have to do some research as to the
Yeah,
case.
And I don't know that it's really
That's relevant to me.
right.
Now, is there a grow now on those premises?
I do not have any information on the premises as of today. I was only prepared to discuss the background.
Well, that's the appeal. Yeah.
Okay, well, do you know whether there has been one?
A grow on the property, I would have to make some phone calls to verify anything beyond what's in the background.
Okay.
Thank you. Ms. Sternick, did you have any final comments at all?
Yes.
Could you come and then 2 minutes?
Okay, so
You get
I
to-
didn't
two-
get a copy of the letter that he just handed out, but,
Come
yeah,
up to
there
the-
was,
Please state your name again for the record.
Laura
And we're
Sternick.
going to hold you to 2 minutes, so.
Okay,
Thanks.
so, yes, we were growing on the property prior to the registration. That was part of, that you had to be in order to get the registration, right? And yes, there was a robbery at the property where people came there with guns and the police showed up and the people with the guns were arrested and taken to jail. And that's what happened. And then there was another time where some people came to rob the place, and they shot one of the guys that works for me, and they got away. Yeah,
Alrighty, well, thanks for that.
so,
All right, thank you. So I'm going to close the public hearing and bring it back to the planning commission.
I think it's fairly clear on this record that there was, in fact, a failure to disclose one of the 3 arrests. That it actually wound up leading to a conviction. Not that that makes any difference under
Right.
the ordinance, but it sort of underscores it just wasn't an arrest and we're sorry to let you go. It was a conviction. And so that seems to be all that the ordinance requires.
Well, I think, sorry, skipping over you. Being consistent with the last one that we reviewed in the same manner, that there was some disclosures that were not made, I'm going to agree with Kelly. I think that it wasn't met and we need to stand by that.
Ted?
I know how I'd like to vote on it, but I don't have that luxury because of the fact it's against the rules. And we gotta go by the rules.
Right, and it was not disclosed, and that is a requirement. And I just want to mention what Lisa did earlier. There's like no judgments up here. It's just that we are following the urgency ordinance and the requirements of that ordinance, and that is one of them, that you fully disclose the information for the background check. So I think we're ready for the recommendation.
Right, staff recommends that the planning commission adopt a motion to adopt resolution 2016-05, denying appeal 2016-1113, thereby upholding the planning director's determination to deny the application.
Is there a motion?
I'll make motion.
It's moved in second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. Thank you. I think we should just continue on. So the next one is 2016-1121.
oh, can I also appeal this?
Yes, you can. Yes.
As with everything else, this action is appealable within 15 calendar days
And where do I appeal it to?
to the board clerk.
No.
No?
She submits it to us.
Oh, I'm sorry, submit to the planning department.
To the planning department to appeal?
Thank you for reminding us. 2016-1121, appeal of denial of commercial cannabis cultivation registration application for APN 020-032-011. Miguel?
Yes. Once more, this is Miguel with the Galveston Planning Department. I'm here presenting Appeal 2016-1121. This is an appeal presented by Kenta Kawagoe of TK Projects LLC. Essentially, Mr. Kawagoe submitted an application for commercial cannabis cultivation, and upon review, it was found that his cultivation site was 1.25 acres rather than the 2-acre minimum required by the urgency ordinance. Specifically, yeah, 165 and 6. In his appeal letter, Mr. Kawagoe's attorney states or argues that because the cultivation was taking place prior to the adoption of the urgency ordinance, they have a vested right to have the cultivation regardless of the 2-acre minimum requirement.
And as is indicated in the urgency ordinance and recognizing the findings by the board. Calaveras County has permissive zoning, and there was no vested right to continue growing just because he had an illegal non-conforming use prior to the existence of the urgency ordinance. I believe in the appeal letter it makes argument that just because he was growing earlier, that he ought to lawfully be able to continue to do so, and that he somehow has a right to do so. And it was clearly the findings of the board that was not the case, and they expressly laid out those findings in 17.95.120V, citing numerous court cases where this issue has been fully adjudicated.
Any questions of staff?
No, but I'd like a couple minutes to read what was submitted here.
Okay, so we'll take a couple minutes. You guys ready? Please.
Good afternoon, Honorable Chair, Honorable Commissioners. Mr. Moore appears to have stepped out, Council. My name is James Anthony. I'm a former zoning prosecutor for the City of Oakland. That's what I was doing 12 years ago. 11 years ago. Since that time, I have worked exclusively in medical cannabis and local government law, for the most part, in California. Sitting here in the blue shirt is Mr. Kenta Kawagoe, who is the appellant landowner. Next to him is Christina Sava, one of my young associates. Thank you for reviewing my latest brief. I apologize for the tardiness of that. That's my response to the staff report. I also handed you a short letter that I helped one of the neighbors prepare, Mr. Bob Smith, and he's also here.
And Mr. Anthony, before
Yes,
you get
ma'am.
started, we'd like to, if you can kind of keep it to about 10 minutes.
Well, I've got myself timed out at 15, but
Okay,
I will try to.
that would be the outer limit then.
I will try to. I remember the outer limits, so I'll try to respect them.
Okay, I do too.
All right. So, all right. I do want to say, though, that in my 15 minutes that I've sat here today and observed your process, and let me say that if there is some kind of award for local government due process, I am nominating you for the silver medal, because you guys really do it. You listen, you deliberate. I sometimes think when I come to a new body that I'm going to have to explain the difference between quasi-judicial and quasi-legislative, and I'm going to skip that part of my presentation. I also want to recognize that your council, in your role as judges, Ms. Moss-Lewis has done an excellent job of advising you as to your discretion to apply the law, all of the law, to the facts in each case. Also respect, I used to sit where this gentleman sits as a zoning prosecutor, so I understand a little bit about everybody's role, and I very much appreciate how it's been handled. I think we can just start right off. I think I can keep this short by just sort of saying what I think is our side of the truth. And, looking at the staff report, it's about 2 pages. It's a bunch of quotes from the urgency ordinance. There's some reference to permissive zoning. as framed up in your zoning code. I mean, I think we're all pretty clear on permissive zoning. It just means if it's not permitted, it's prohibited, which does beg the question of what was permitted before May 10th. Staff report acknowledges that a pre-existing illegal use does not vest recognizable property rights. And I think we all know that a pre-existing legal use is vested, that zoning goes forward in time only, and that we cannot zone retroactively, not under the Constitution of the United States. So I think if we actually look at the law, if we look at your zoning code, if you look at page 1 of my reply there down at the bottom, there's the law. This location where Mr. Kawagoe was 30 days before the ordinance passed, cultivating cannabis, is rural residential. When you look at the definition of rural residential's permitted uses, permitted as of right, right at the very top, A1, is agricultural operations. No CUP, no special permission, nothing. Permitted as of right. Agricultural operations are defined in your zoning code. You can see there clearly that they involve growing all plants. At that point, there was no reference to growing cannabis as some kind of specific special use. Furthermore, the definition goes on, if you look at the top of page 2 of my brief, and it says that this definition that agricultural operations includes growing all plants shall be broadly construed unless limited by strict provisions of a specific use, which there were not until May 10th, when for the first time there was a reference to the cultivation of cannabis in your county code. Medical cannabis under state law and under your law, the county's law, the government's law, prior to May 10th, was as legal under the conditions of nonprofit collectives, which I set that one up, so let me assure you that one was legal as tomatoes or almonds, right? And if your county government, your board of supervisors decided that they don't like tomatoes and almonds and hay or corn or anything else, they could restrict that. They could conceivably prohibit it going forward in time. But they could not turn around and say to anybody with a rural residential property who had been cultivating those plants prior to that point that, oh, sorry, we're going to shut you down. We're going to take your use, right? That's a land grab. That's punishing somebody. It's changing the rules going backwards in time. It's exactly what you cannot do under the Constitution. Now, doesn't mean that the ordinance had no effect. It had a very profound effect. You remember what it was like back here, January, February, March. The governor had just signed in October the MMRSA, now the MCRSA, and everybody was, there was some kind of March 31st deadline for zoning, or you were going to lose all your power, and everybody was scrambling around. That turned out to be a typo. There were attempts at passing urgency ordinances, which for good reason require a 4/5 vote, that failed until May 10th. And the reason that was happening was it wasn't clear if cannabis cultivation was legal or illegal or what. Some of it might have been legal. That line in the sand that the County Board of Supervisors, the government drew on May 10th, I check my time, that prevents any cannabis cultivation in the future from occurring in this county unless fully in compliance with whatever future ordinances. That was important. That got it under control. That's what an urgency ordinance does. A moratorium prevents any further such activity. Now, is the Board of Supervisors going to load up their ordinance with a lot of stuff saying, none of you were ever legal anyway? Of course they are. I would have advised them to do the same thing. Does that mean that they can take a property right in that way? Of course not. Right? So that's why we have judges. And that's why you sit here in your quasi-judicial function. Now, I said something about speeding this up by telling the truth. And the truth is hard, and sometimes it has consequences, and sometimes we don't like them. The law is the law, and that's what you've got. And the best thing is to own up to that and deal with it. You can have some reasonable conditions. You can ask people to register. Oakland, 300 liquor stores in Oakland, okay? We can't close those with a zoning ordinance. They were all there. before the zoning code even existed. But they're all deemed approved, they're all wrapped in conditions, we all control them for actual nuisance, which, by the way, there is no allegation of nuisance in fact in this case. That staff report is devoid of any factual allegations whatsoever because it stands on this rather, weak, permissive zoning, and this is what it says in the urgency ordinance. That's irrelevant. Read the zoning code. The zoning code at the time is clear. Growing plants is a permitted as-of-right use in rural residential, and it was established prior to the passage of the urgency ordinance. So I'm not sure what the consequences of all of that might be, but the consequence of changing the rules on people after they've come and established legal uses and to try to make that go retroactively, that is not acceptable, right? We have a constitution, and so we end up with these kind of settled principles, and sometimes we don't like them. The Ku Klux Klan has the First Amendment right to march in the street and spread their message. I don't like that. And I and the ACLU will defend their right, because we all have the same rights. Mr. Kalagoy's property rights are the same as somebody who was here 30 years ago growing tomatoes or 30 days ago growing tomatoes. The county is free in its police power, its broad powers, to legislate going forward in time. It is restricted by the Constitution in legislating backwards in time. So where do we go from here? Well, obviously, my suggestion is that you have your council write up a decision granting the appeal based on those legal arguments. You've also shown in your discretion today that you have other approaches. Given that there is no nuisance in fact, you'll hear from one of the neighbors very clearly that there's no nuisance. In fact, this is a small grow. It's under 5,000 square feet. It's not bothering anybody. No allegation in the staff report. You could, in your quasi-judicial power, under the civil code's maxims of jurisprudence, make a de minimis finding. Couple acres, acre and a quarter, close enough, not bothering anybody, met all the requirements. That registration that he filed was 100% completely truthful. My clients do not misrepresent or omit any information on an application, because that is death to an application right there. It's over, right? And then the other thing they do is they keep the neighbors happy, because you can't keep your neighbors happy, don't come to me, right? Go fix your issues with your neighbors. Don't expect me to be able to do something about that. So you could do that without having to take my constitutional reading. Your counsel is capable of writing that up either way. Let me just say that the other thing you could do, if you're not willing to make any of those conclusions of law and findings of fact, is you can push me to appeal to the Board of Supervisors. And I would ask that, given that we have a clearly colorable legal argument that he has a property right here, that you stay enforcement and you direct the government to halt the penalties pending those appeals. I think you can do that either in this appeal right now, or we got a code enforcement appeal coming up right after this. So I would ask that you not rack up $1,000 a day, $30,000 a month, $300,000 a year while we're going through the appeal process to see if this question of law can be answered by yourselves as judges, by the Board of Supervisors sitting quasi-judicial, by your Superior Court judges here in the County of Calaveras, or wherever we need to go. But this is an important constitutional issue. We're not going to let it go. As I say, the ordinance was not ineffective. It has controlled the situation going forward. Let me just say quickly that I've done a lot of research on this, is what I do. Post-alcohol prohibition, the same thing happened. Local governments would flip-flop. They go, okay, alcohol's legal again, it's been 13 years, go ahead, do whatever you want to do. Things would run a little out of control. And then they go, oh no, wait a minute, there's no alcohol in this county. And then they go, well, maybe, Monday to Saturday until 10 o'clock and nothing on Sunday, right? They'd work it out. They'd flip-flop, but they'd work it out. It's going to happen here, it's happening in Calaveras, it's happening in Yolo. Yolo said you could put up an acre, just put a fence around it. Now they're going, whoa, wait a minute, ban, moratorium, let's figure this out, okay? The market is going to flood, and the prices will crash. Farming is not for the lighthearted. It's hard work. In the long run, it's hard to be a farmer, no matter what, especially if it's legal. This is all changing before our eyes. And I ask that you do what you've been doing all day long, which is apply the law to the facts. Thank you.
Any questions of Mr. Anthony?
Yes. Under your view of how this works, if somebody was growing prior to May 10th, let's say 10 acres of canopy in a rural residential zoning, would they then have a constitutional right to continue growing that 10 acres of canopy forever, basically, no matter what the state law provided and no matter what the county tried to do?
All right, first of all, those are not the facts in my case, but it's an interesting hypothetical. Facts in my case are 400-plus plants, 30 days before the ordinance, about what, would be a 5,000 square foot of greenhouse. So the question of the legality, right, prior to the ordinance is, was it legal under state and local law? So they would have to show, and I'm sure the other council in the room can confirm this, that they had sufficient patient numbers in that collective to justify those plant numbers, right? We are transitioning from a criminal defense, a collective defense, where your plant numbers have to be justified by your patient numbers on a reasonableness standard in front of a court of law on a criminal charge. That's what we have now.
Actually,
we're moving to a
excuse me.
licensing system.
Excuse me.
So
We're like
that's where we're
dragging
going.
this out, and you're not answering the question.
The question is, it would depend if it was legal or not, and I'm saying that this one was legal 30 days before,
Okay,
and so it is still
next
legal.
question, he didn't answer.
And then it can't be expanded, right? Obviously, a grandfathered use is limited in intensity.
One more quick one.
Sure.
Your brief points out that the prior legal nonconforming use has to be continuous.
Correct.
Thereafter. Now, how does that jive with a situation where somebody plants marijuana and then they harvest it for
Right.
an outdoor grow, say in
Right.
October or whatever?
Right.
And then they don't plant again until, pick your date, March, April, May, depending on
Right.
where you're at.
Okay.
Would you say that that is nonetheless continuous?
That would be continuous if that was the cycle of agriculture in that case. In this case, there are small plants out there being continuously cultivated, which is why it has not been able to show evidence of abatement, because it hasn't abated because it's standing on the right. But you're in that, if it went fallow for the winter and replanted in the spring, and that was the cycle, that would be continuous, sure.
Okay, thank you.
In this, is it okay?
Yes, no, I was.
In this case, the property is 1.25 acres.
Correct.
It clearly states in the urgency ordinance that for commercial cannabis, 2 acres. To move on, as a strong proponent of property rights myself, you do make a pretty darn good argument, but, provision specific to use agriculture, things like tobacco. That would be one thing that would be instated underneath that. To move on, as soon as he signed that the registration for commercial marijuana, it is my true belief he took the step aside from his medical use any longer. He, at that point, was registering, and it clearly states in the registration of the application that he's going to try and conform underneath the rule set forth as per the urgency ordinance instituted by supervisors. So at that point, he was saying he would abide by that 2-acre rule, in my opinion.
Well, I would say that he was voluntarily registering to comply as much as possible, but he told you it was a 1.25 acre property, and he did not waive his rights.
Lisa?
I'm going to pass it down because this isn't a hard decision for me. The arguments that you made didn't apply here. That urgency ordinance was very clear, 2 acres. There was a reason for that. It is a nuisance. It does affect neighbors around them. We wanted space around it. The odors travel no matter where you're located, so it's a nuisance no matter how you look at it. So applying for it, paying the fees was his choice. He knew he did not comply with the urgency ordinance. That was his choice. So it's a real simple decision for me.
I'm kind of agree with you, and I think it's kind of obvious that that's the only way it can be. I don't see how we can do otherwise.
Well, your argument hinges on one thing,
Yes, sir.
and that is the definition of agricultural operations.
Correct.
And that says it included, I'm quoting from your brief, quote, growing and harvesting and sale of any agricultural commodity, and then it has a number of inclusions, timber, trees, and all other plants. However, to fall within agricultural operations, whatever it is you're growing has to be an agricultural commodity. That's where you start. And that's where I'm having difficulty agreeing with your argument, because in common sense parlance, marijuana is not considered an agricultural commodity. It's considered a plant that produces a drug. And that's how I view it. And I think that's how the Board of Supervisors that passed these ordinances views it, because these grows are not eligible for inclusion under the Williamson Act.
Could I respond briefly?
Please.
So that is certainly true going forward from May 10th. But prior to May 10th, there's no indication of that. Many drugs and plants come from each other. That's where drugs come from. They come from plants. This is a definition which, by its own terms, shall be broadly construed unless limited by the strict provisions of the specific uses listed as permitted uses, which did not happen until May 10th. Right? So I beg to differ with you as to the commodity nature. You pass an ordinance calling it commercial, it moves in commerce. Broadly construed, it would be a commodity. Yes,
Does
sir.
Prop 215 provide definition for a specific use as of medical marijuana? I would think so.
So for medical purposes, yeah.
Right, so that's a specific use. Am I correct?
Okay. Let's see where you're going with, right, this not limiting your definition of agricultural operation.
Right. When you were talking earlier, provision, specific use, agriculture were an exception to your definition of agriculture. So that's where I'm going with it specifically. That's why I asked you about tobacco as a specific use. You know,
It's a plant, it's an agricultural commodity. Growing it is an agricultural operation.
It's also a Class 1 drug under the federal government, too.
something I cannot just go and grow on my property if I wanted to.
You can if you're a legal medical cannabis collective.
No, I'm not. I'm talking about tobacco right now. We're still on that. But then you go on, and medical marijuana was a specific use for marijuana. It defined it as such. Medical use.
Right, but that doesn't take it out of the definition of agricultural operation for the purposes of Calaveras County zoning prior to May 10th.
Well, see, it doesn't say agricultural operations include growing of all plants. It doesn't say that.
Fair enough.
What it says is it includes growing and harvesting and sale of any agricultural commodity, and if
Broadly
unless you
construed.
fall within that definition of agricultural commodity,
Right.
you're not there. And what I'm suggesting to you is that the phrase all other plants still has to fall within the category
enough.
of agricultural commodity. And as I said before, I don't view marijuana, whose sole use is as a drug of some kind, once it's dried, harvested, refined, or whatever, as an agricultural commodity as opposed to a substance that leads to a drug. That's my view of
I understand.
looking at this ordinance, and my fellow commissioners may or may not agree with me.
All right.
Commissioner Wooster, I mean, the supervisors did make a finding on that point, and they found that it was in agriculture for the purposes of variances to grading, building requirements, and things like that. We were specifically directed that it's not agriculture, and that's why they can't qualify for the exemptions that agricultural growers otherwise qualify for. And additionally, council brought up the example of liquor stores in Oakland, and they were a pre-existing use, so we can't shut them down. Well, I mean, if you had a liquor store that was going on in a yurt and didn't comply with building code requirements, you could close it down. And here we have a grow happening on 1.25 acres. We require 2 acres. You can close it down.
Well, that would remain to be seen. Certainly all true going forward from May 10th or whatever that date was. You know, they can say it's agricultural or not agricultural, although I think now they've been superseded by state law. Regardless, prior to May 10th, I don't see that this is a difficult finding. It's a commodity. It moves in commerce. It's a plant. Yes, it becomes a drug. Many plants become drugs. Wine, grapes. They grow grapes. Are they not agricultural commodities because they are turned into a drug?
Some are made into raisins.
Yeah. So
Raisins can be addictive, I'm just saying.
So let's see if there's...
There ought to be a ban.
They can't.
Ban raisins. Go ahead.
Mr. Anthony, let's
Yes,
see if
ma'am.
there's anyone else that would like to address the Planning Commission on this appeal.
Mr. Smith, this is your moment. This is what you've sat here for all day.
Looks like we won.
Hello, my name is Robert Smith, and I'm a neighbor of Kente. Ever since he's been there, he's been a very good neighbor. I have no issues with him. They tend to take care of their business, I take care of mine. If I need help with something other, I can ask them, they'll help me with it. I personally don't do marijuana, I don't believe in marijuana, but what they do, I figure that's their business. You know, I'm not a marijuana person. And I've lived here, well, we've had the property for over 30 years. But there on Miller Ranch Road, it seems like it's a real cliquish neighborhood. If you don't fit in, they're out to get you. I think that's part of the problem that's going on here. The man is, as you can see, he's an Asian. We don't have any other Asians there. I think somebody is racially profiling him. There's other marijuana grows up there. They don't say nothing about it. The county doesn't say nothing about it. And I am not a marijuana person. But whenever I see a bunch, I've had people call me, ask me about them. I've been walking my dog. One of the biggest marijuana growers up here lives on Miller Ranch Road, stops, and he says, "Have you met the new people?" I said, "Yeah, I met them." And he goes, "What do you think about them?" And I said, "As people, they're okay." I said, "They're no different than you are." Prior to them buying the property, it was up for sale. There was another Asian group of people that came in, 2 young fellas. They got stuck on my property. So I towed them out with the truck. Then I mentioned to this guy, I'm not going to mention his name because I'm sure people know who I'm talking about. But anyhow, I mentioned, yeah, I had to pull them off my property because they were stuck in the mud. "Oh, you know what they're here for?" He goes, "I don't want those people here." I said, "Hey," I said, "you can't stop people from buying property and coming in and doing what they want, as long as they try to do it legally. They try to do things the right way. It's not up to us to decide. That's up to you guys to decide. Or somebody bigger." But I do believe that what's happening on Miller Ranch Road is a racial thing because 2 Asian families that tried to get in there and do something with that property have been discriminated against. I don't understand it.
Well-
Pardon?
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Let me assure you and the appellant as well, is that, whatever decision we make today is not based upon his qualities as a good neighbor, nor is it based on his ethnicity.
Oh, don't take me wrong, I'm not throwing this at you.
Well, I just wanted to make that clear, though.
I'm just saying if there was anybody on Miller Ranch Road that has a problem, a nuisance problem, it's probably because it's a racial thing.
Well, that's unfortunate.
Well, everybody and anybody with 1 1/4 acres in this entire county is not allowed to grow. So it's not your street. It's in the entire county. You've got to have 2 acres. So that specific property isn't being profiled for that reason. It's because the urgency ordinance specified 2 acres, so it's a countywide ordinance. 2 acres.
Well,
There's the issue.
It's not
There
personal.
again, I'm not familiar with that because like I
Right.
say, I don't do marijuana, so I don't follow the rules.
Yeah.
I know the rules have been changed as they went. But all I can talk about is the quality that these people
Appreciate that.
Thank you very much,
Give
Mr.
up.
Smith. Thank you.
and what they're getting treated.
Good neighbors.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's what
We like good neighbors.
Thank you.
we like good neighbors.
So is there someone else, anyone else that wants to address the commission? Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Sure.
We're just trying to move along here, too.
All right.
Vicki Reinke, Angels Camp. I just wanted to get a clarification or make a point, I'm not sure which it is, because when council got up and talked about this being a commodity and that they have a right to grow plants on their properties, and prior to MRSA, it was only medical marijuana grows for dispensaries, and I guess that's what his client was doing. But I wanted to clarify then, I don't think it was considered a commodity that was, I forget the term he used, but that went out and was sold and a product like that. Because prior to MRSA, all medical marijuana grows were nonprofit, they were not for-profit, and there were laws that got stretched and stretched. So I guess I wanted to, whether it needs to be clarified right now or at least have it in your mind about that, because there's 2 different things that are happening. First there was Prop 215, and now there's MRSA. And MRSA came in, that's when our county decided to do an urgency ordinance. And I'm just assuming that the urgency ordinance becomes the law, so I just wanted to clarify. Thanks.
Anyone else? Mr. Anthony, do you have any closing?
Yeah, just briefly, let me.
Couple of minutes, very brief.
Exactly. Let me find the full text of the definition. My apologies, this is what I get for summarizing and shrinking my text. I eliminated the full text of the definition, but I know I have it here. One moment. Let's see. Here we go. 17.06.0132, agricultural operation. Agricultural operation means the use of land for any of the following, whether or not for the purpose of producing income. A, preparation of land. B, range management. C, cultivation and tillage, growing and harvesting. Sale of any agricultural commodity, including, as you pointed out, and so on and so forth. So, not only is that not an issue in your zoning code prior to the government zoning code prior to May 10th, it's not an issue under state law. We're clearly under our nonprofit collective system. Cannabis is moving in commerce. Billions of dollars of it, over $100 million in sales tax. So nonprofits, and I suspect that you are the kind of engaged, civic-minded community citizens who sit on the boards of some nonprofits, and so as you may probably well know, it's not that a nonprofit has to make less money than it spends, then it would be called bankrupt, right? It just can't distribute that profit. There are no shareholders. People make a salary, they pay interest on loans, they pay expenses, they pay the rent. That's what nonprofits do, right? So those issues do not go to the essential issue of the property right to grow plants in rural residential prior to May 10th. As to other issues that government counsel raised about reasonable conditions, well, that's not what we're talking about, and that's not what's alleged in the staff report. And if you want some reasonable conditions, we're happy to sit down with counsel and negotiate those and abide by them as terms of settlement. That's another option you have for resolving this matter without taking it up. You may be concerned about what is the precedent of your making my constitutional decision. Consider the precedent of either the Board of Supervisors or the Superior Court or the Appellate Court or the Supreme Court of the state of California making that decision. So think about how you want to handle this.
Thank you.
Mr. Anthony, I got one more question.
Sure.
You just mentioned that cannabis is moving in commerce.
Yes, sir.
And how is it that you can have a legal use when this commodity moving in commerce, which then gives the federal government the right to regulate it, classifies it as a completely illegal substance?
That is the beauty of our federalist system, sir.
Yes, and federal law trumps state law every time.
Not every time, sir.
If the federal government has a constitutional right to do it, yes, it does.
No, it doesn't, sir. There's the 10th Amendment, and we have been to the United States Supreme Court, and they have never preempted any state medical cannabis law. We just have dual sovereignty. We exist under two systems of law. That's how we do it here. And we're about to see a lot more of it. Counsel.
I just would like to, before the Planning Commission deliberates, I just want to point out a couple of things. To the extent that the interpretation of our own local agricultural definition is interpreted by our own Board of Supervisors, the Board of Supervisors' interpretation of its own ordinance will be given great deference in the court that reviews the case. There's a lot of room for our own board to interpret its own ordinances. So if the board is interpreting, to the extent you believe the board is interpreting cannabis cultivation as not constituting an agricultural use that was permitted prior to May 10th, that decision will likely be given great deference in court. Second of all, I just want to point out that California courts have, in analogous cases, found permissive zoning laws similar to ours to be adequate to have a court find that cannabis was a cannabis-related use was in fact not allowed. There has been a finding that the county does not have to expressly ban or expressly restrict in order for a permissive zoning ordinance to hold up as actually restricting the product. So that's my understanding of the law. So I do believe that the Planning Commission, if it believes that the board intended an agricultural use to not include cannabis, I believe the board does have the discretion to make that decision. It has the discretion to make another decision, but I disagree with appellant's counsel that you don't have discretion to find otherwise.
Thank you. Okay.
Just very quickly, would you also agree, counsel, that a court might take a different view of the Board of Supervisors' interpretation of a law going forward as opposed to a law applied retroactively?
I'm going to refrain from answering that question.
Well, I think you owe it to your client to advise them that that's possible, that there is some possible, that, my legal argument is possible.
If they ask me a question, at that point I owe them an answer.
All right. And then just secondly, on permissive zoning, in those cases, were those not cases where a zoning administrator was asked to exercise discretion in deciding a similar use? or where there were other complicating factors. Whereas here, there's no need to even go to the permissive zoning instruction, which is basically like a rule of interpretation if it's not clear. Here it was clear. Do you agree that that distinction might also be recognized by a court?
I'm not going to be cross-examined by you, sir.
I'm
If
just
the,
saying
If
that-
my own clients wish me to answer a question, I will.
Thank you,
very much.
Thank you very much. All right, so we close the public hearing. Planning Commission.
Well, okay. I guess I can lead off. The permissive zoning point of this, I agree that this county does have permissive zoning. If it's not something that's allowed under the zoning category, then you can't do it. The question is not really so much that, it's whether or not agricultural operations, which is limited to the growing and harvesting and sale of any agricultural commodity, includes medical cannabis, and I do not think that it does, and apparently the board has expressed a view that they don't think it does either. So that's one point. The second point is I still do not believe that you get a legal non-conforming use out of growing a plant that is completely illegal under federal law. And so for those reasons, I'm in favor of denying the appeal.
State sovereignty, the 10th Amendment. Let's go on to what the state says with what the people just voted on in Prop 64, is that each county may, through land use ordinance, restrict the use of marijuana more so than what the state law will be. And that's what the state, through Prop 64, voted in by the people, has given the county supervisors the power to do. And at that point, in my true belief, with the supervisors putting that 2-acre minimum, that right there was okayed by the highest end of the state, the people that voted on it.
I think that the moment that your client, the appellant, signed the registration and application, he accepted the ordinance of 17 point, I can't even think anymore. He signed that application agreeing to the terms of the urgency ordinance in this county. You accepted the fact knowing that it was a 2-acre minimum and you didn't qualify. That's a risk you took. That was a right you signed off for. I don't believe you met the requirements of the urgency ordinance, and I'm sorry for that. I believe in land use rights. I think you're probably a very good attorney when it comes to going to court over land use. I do believe you might have this one just a little bit wrong in our county on the urgency ordinance. We're not dealing with a normal land use issue. We are dealing with something that's still illegal under the federal government. So as far as I'm concerned, we've got several constitutions that exist. I believe your client signed his rights away the minute he signed the application agreeing to our urgency ordinance. And that's going to be my position.
I'm ready for the recommendation.
Okay, Ted. Along with Mr. Wooster, I think I agree with the permissive zoning code that we have, and that if it's not permitted, then if it's not listed, it's not permitted. I do believe that the Board of Supervisors expressly excluded cannabis as an agricultural commodity, and with Commissioner Lisa, I also agree that it was very clear in the urgency ordinance that there is a 2-acre minimum. So I will not be in favor of granting the appeal. I don't believe that requirements have been met. So with that, I think we're ready for the recommendation.
Staff recommends that a motion be passed by the Planning Commission to adopt Resolution 2016-044, denying Appeal 2016-1121, thereby upholding the Planning Director's determination to deny the application 2016-691.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved in second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. You want to do the notice of appeal spiel?
Oh, yes. This action is appealable within 15 calendar days, filing an appeal with Board of Supervisors, and file at the planning department.
Thank you. All right, so now we are going back to Troy.
Was a copy of the new language on the resolution distributed? Because I don't believe I got it.
Not yet. It is now. And so this is 2016-1107 appeal of planning director's denial of commercial cannabis cultivation registration application 2016-033 for APN 010-021-120. And the issue was that staff was going to come back with revision to the resolution that may satisfy several of the commissioners' feeling that the requirement for the seller's permit was indeed substantiated. So we're going to take a moment.
Okay. The second whereas clause from the bottom says, whereas the appellant's failure to include a copy of his seller's permit with his application is akin to a clerical error rather than an act of substantive negligence or noncompliance on his part. It's unclear what that word application is referring to. There's no application required on September 7th. That's required on June 30th. And we're talking about the inadvertent failure to include the seller's permit with the materials that he submitted on, well, actually prior to September 7th, but by the September 7th deadline.
Maybe it would be better than to strike that with his application and put it instead by September 7th, 2016.
Yeah, I think it should read something like, whereas the appellant's failure to submit a copy of his seller's permit to the planning department by September 7th, 2016, and then continue with is akin to. And then under the first finding, it says the Planning Commission has determined that even a strict application of the urgency ordinance would allow an exception to be made for a clear clerical error and so forth. I think it should say a clear, inadvertent clerical error in which a timely received document was accidentally omitted, etc.
Those are good
And
additions.
again, probably the application packet
Yep.
on the last under the evidence of number 1 was accidentally not submitted by the September 7th deadline.
Just to be clear. By the September.
And on the second evidence, this last sentence should be struck. We're not disapproving or denying the content, so. And number 2 evidence.
Looks good to me.
Does it work?
I'm still worrying a little bit.
So while he's working on that, Julie, I'd like to just throw something at you for a minute. So, I mean, it's obvious that he had his permit. It's obvious that we had a second case today that also had their permit, and I believe we're going to see several of these down the road where that paper was missing and didn't get turned in by the 7th. We are not here to set policy. We're here to follow ordinances and policies. We don't make them. We make recommendations to the supervisors for approval. This appears to me that we are not going to follow the urgency ordinance in its exact code because we believe the intent was there for it to go through. But in an effort to have to not hear every single one of these because of the interpretation of the ordinance on this, it clearly states it had to be here September 7th. I would like to have this taken back to the Board of Supervisors to give direction for the Planning Department on how to deal with this in the future so that it doesn't have to keep coming back to us as appeals. I mean, we're not policy setters, we're recommendators. We make recommendations, and I want to make sure that this is something that's cleared through the Board of Supervisors if this goes through and we're not going to follow the urgency ordinance as the Planning Department has.
I think if we actually grant the appeal, the case itself cannot go to the board. What I can do if the Planning Commission directs me to is to basically ask the question, present it to Megan, the attorney for the Board of Supervisors, to see if there's a way for her to agendize clarifying a policy or an interpretation. And
Or intent.
Yeah, and so I can make that request and she'll, advise as to how, if and how that can be made, but I can definitely forward the question.
Okay, so I'm not comfortable, just so that I can state my opinion on the record, with voting on this resolution because I believe it goes against the urgency ordinance in its face value. I believe this gentleman met all the requirements. In my heart and soul, he did. But it doesn't follow the urgency ordinance. The Planning Department denied it based on that language in the ordinance, which I think they did their job right. I believe it needs to go to the Board of Supervisors. They need to be having this hearing. That would mean they make that final determination, and that's what would give direction to our Planning Department going ahead in the future. I think that's the proper way to be handling this, but that's just my opinion. I'm on the record with it, and there you go.
Duly noted.
Duly noted. Thank you.
And see, I don't see it as setting policy. I don't see it as setting policy. I think it is still strict adherence.
It's
It's overruling the ordinance.
I don't think it's overruling the
difference
ordinance.
between the letter of the law and the intent of the law, and this is where we're going right now. And I have a hard time going with the intent of the law most of the time myself, but this time, I truly believe that if the person's intent was to follow all the rules and they got it prior to the 7th of September, then they were following the intent of the supervisors at that time, and there may be, once again, another note for next year when we delve back into this.
All of our staff is gone. Peter, if your staff is looking at these applications and the next one down the line, will they also say, didn't have it here by September 7th, you're being denied? Is that going to be a constant thorn for you for your interpretation of the ordinance? Does this need to come from direction from the supervisors?
It would be helpful to have it from the supervisors. I would have to say that if we had identical circumstances, we would not deny the application.
Okay.
Based on the action. I know that you guys are not the primary policy makers, the board is, but your actions do essentially set policy. Sometimes you are the final decision maker on certain types of actions. In this case, you could be the final decision maker on this appeal if it's not further appeal to the board. I've never really faced anything quite like this before.
Right.
It's all new to all
I
of
would
us.
have to say that, the board is the primary policy decision body, but you also as a commission have policy. You have, spent a great deal of time establishing policy for the general plan. Ultimately that does go to the board and they have.
Everything
concurred
gets
with your
approved
policy.
by the board, though.
And so if the board disagrees with your decision on this one, they have the ability to reverse that either through us bringing it to them through council recommendation or by a subsequent appeal by the public.
Now, if we were to grant this appeal, can you appeal from our granting it to the board?
Could I appeal it? No.
So that's the end of it.
No, unless somebody
Unless
from the
either
public.
the public or the applicant.
Or you can direct me again to bring that to, to Megan's attention, and she can determine whether or not, she can get, realistically, I'm assuming that the board looks at these, even though, I'm not 100% sure, but we can bring it to her attention, and, she can, ask the question, and if they feel they need to clarify it, I assume there would be some way that it could be agendized for clarification if there's a disagreement with the decision.
Okay, because my concern is that we do this today, and then every hearing going into the future that has a small twist to it, this hearing and approval will always come back at us because, well, you approved it for this one because of this little twist, and then it's going to constantly be thrown at us if it doesn't have board approval and policy setting behind it. And that's what my big concern is that every time we have a hearing and then we have the attorneys come in with their clients, they're constantly throwing these in our face, well, this is what you did, and this is what the supervisors did with fashing. That's fine. I mean, they're quoting that because that's the policy we're setting here today. And I want to make sure we're following the urgency ordinance so that it is always backed up with our decisions and the board of supervisors being the ones that set the policy. So
just to clarify, if the board does say, no, we wouldn't have wanted this, it's not going to be binding on the appellant. The appellant will not be affected by, if the appeal is granted, the appellant is not going to be affected by any clarification by the board of supervisors. This being said, if the board feels that there's a correction, I presume there would be some way that they could announce that.
I'm pretty confident the board is going to be okay with this intent. I mean, what do I know? We're going to have a whole new board. So I don't know. That's me making an interpretation that's not correct. I give up. You got my point. You duly noted it.
Okay, I'm troubled by the way this is worded, though, because it seems to say that even if you have a strict application of the urgency ordinance, it would allow an exception to be made for a clear clerical error. And that kind of hangs me up on Lisa's point, which is I don't think this commission ought to be creating exceptions to anything. I think that the way I'm looking at this is that even though the Planning Commission has determined that the urgency ordinance generally should receive a strict application, that with respect to the submission of documents prior to September 7th, where the applicant has in substance complied with the obtaining of all necessary permits, and the inadvertent failure to submit them to the planning department by September 7th was simply a mistake. But in substance, the requirements were met. Other than that mistake, that's sufficient to satisfy the urgency ordinance. I'm not sure I got that exactly right.
I understand what you're saying. I think it is the word exception, because then it's like, well, an exception here, an exception there, so it's not really yeah, here.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I would agree with that. Advice from your town director. Ultimately, it's your decision.
No, I mean, I think it's a good, yeah.
You have it on tape, so I won't ask you.
I mean, if I kind of sit back and look at this like, a normal, reasonable person on the street would, I think they'd say, is there any common sense being brought to bear here on what we're trying to do? And I think when I kind of look at it that way, I got to say, this guy really did, for all intents and purposes, for anything that really matters, he did comply, okay?
Right.
That's where I'm at.
Right.
Okay.
So,
If somebody can somehow put something together that kind of tracks what I tried to say.
and I think, Peter said it is on tape, and I totally agree with it. It's a great revision.
Okay.
So how do we vote on that revision?
So
Can you
it's,
repeat it?
yeah, I mean, there've been, can you summarize the several that have been made to the resolution?
So under the second to last whereas on page 1, it says been revised to read the appellant's failure to submit a copy of the seller's permit by September 17, 2016 is akin to a clerical error rather than active substantive negligence or non-compliance on his part. And then I'll skip down to fund number 2, we're striking the last sentence in the evidence section regarding sequel compliance. I don't have the exact language written down, so I can't repeat it verbatim. We do have it on tape, and we can reproduce it in the final document. But essentially, what you were saying, what Mr. Booster said was that the commission determined that the intent of the ordinance was met.
Well, I think what I said was that we determined that even though the commission determines that a strict application of the urgency ordinance is generally applicable. And then I forgot what I said after that, but it was, in substance, he complied.
Complied with the substantive requirements by having the seller's permit issued to him prior to the deadline. I had more in there than that, but.
Yeah, it was better.
Yeah.
His version was better.
That was essentially what.
Yeah.
The gist of
Okay.
it was, is that you do have a strict application, what I'm looking for here, that you generally apply the ordinance in a strict manner.
And we're not really making an
And you're not
exception.
making an exception, but you are finding that the issuance of a seller's permit to the applicant prior to September 7th met that requirement.
Well, coupled with the myriad of inadvertence to submit it,
Yes.
because he submitted everything else prior to the time.
Right.
Okay.
Is there a motion?
I would move to grant the appeal on the basis of the resolution as amended.
I'll
Second.
second that.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
No. 4-1. Okay, thank you very much. All right, so I've got. Thank you. Have a good night. Yeah.
Who seconded that motion?
Who was it? You
It
did?
was Ben.
Oh, Ben. All right, so I don't know how long these take, but I do have to be out of here by 6. So if we're not out of here by 6, you're going to have to work it out without me.
You know what?
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
So we don't have a study session. We do have a public comment period. So if there's somebody with us that would like to address the Planning Commission on an item that's not on our agenda, this would be your opportunity. Okay.
Colleen is still hanging out with
Any
her.
planning director reports?
Not a girl.
She's solid.
Just one brief item. As you know, your terms expire on the 21st of December. The board is meeting the second Tuesday, and your first meeting will be the second Thursday, which is 2 days later. There is an item on the board's agenda that is pursuant to our county code, extending your term until the board
What makes the
appoints
appointments?
new members are to appoint those who are still young. So plan on being here unless you're replaced
So
on the first meeting of January.
the application process, because a lot of people have asked where they get an application to apply. I looked under committees on the website for the county and don't see any applications posted. None have been sent out to us to reapply or...
Contact your
It's all
supervisor.
digital now since I
Yes, I
started.
went and looked online.
And it's kind of a pain in the butt to get to it because you gotta go through commissions.
I did that.
And then on the right, there's a thing to apply. I forget how I went through it, but it wasn't working right until I found a little thing at the bottom of the page.
So if anybody wanted to continue serving or people wanted to apply and they can't find that or apply for it,
Lisa, call Diane Severin.
Yeah.
Our board clerk,
Well, wouldn't it-
754-6059.
I don't want to flood Diane with a bunch of phone calls.
No,
It'd
that's
just
her
be
job.
easier if someone sent us a link and said, would you consider
Well, maybe
reapplying?
Diane will do that.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I will call Diane, but in the meantime, I'll try to find the link for you.
Okay. With that, we're adjourned. Now,
We have public comment.
yeah, we're adjourned as a planning commission. And now we are,
Wait, I think he wants to do public comment at the end of our meeting.
we already did that.
No, I'm the next up on the Administrative Hearing
Okay.
Board agenda.
Okay.
So now we are convening a special hearing of the Administrative Hearing Board. Our first item is 2016-006 Kagawi Appeal of Code Compliance Citation.
I didn't previously give you guys an appeal letter. It wasn't in the staff report.
Tired. Thank you.
I don't have that power.
Oh, I don't? I wish someone had it over me. I'm ready to be fired at home. I don't want to work anymore.
Okay, somebody might pop up, thanks.
And your other ones are there. Yep.
Did you just have the same staff report, covered both of them?
Actually, I believe I sent your...
Oh, here it is, I have it right
Yeah,
here.
okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
God, I need some
And
water.
the gist of it
yeah,
is,
yeah, I see.
yeah.
So, are you doing an overview?
Yeah, I had Todd show up here because he's the only code enforcement person on the campus today. The position of code enforcement is that since under the urgency ordinance, any cultivation of marijuana is not in strict compliance with the urgency ordinance is a per se nuisance. So the instant that Peter denies a registration, Todd's team sends out a notice of violation because the cultivation automatically, by operation of law, becomes a nuisance. So the inquiry for this appeal is really only into whether or not Todd's staff's determination that a nuisance was going on was correct. And if cultivation is going on in the absence of a pending registration or a granted registration, it's a per se nuisance.
That is correct. At the time the citation was issued, there was no evidence that any of the violations had been removed from the property.
That concludes staff's presentation.
Okay. Mr. Anthony?
I would only ask that you consider...
Can we take a moment? We need to change DVD on
Okay.
the page, so now they great.
Woohoo!
Gets into-
Was that a terabyte? It's been a good day.